Hey there, we just wanted to let you know that there may be some content in here with some colorful language or off-color topics, and we wanted to let you know ahead of time, so please listen at your own discretion. There it is.
We're in, guys.
We're on with the clapper.
So we're talking about Rogan's kids
I feel like
because I'm pretty sure, like, it fucking matters.
I feel like with a
He
dude
has a daughter. He has 3 kids.
with a dude as enlightened as Rogan, if he's got an 8-year-old daughter, they're probably as smart as the average 16-year-old daughter. So that's probably why you thought that.
But also, he has a 20-year-old daughter from a different mother.
What a scoundrel!
Are you like...
What? A
you
scoundrel. It was it was his relationship he was in before he met his wife. He had a daughter with
That's
her.
so uncommon in America. I don't get it.
You know what? I'm way off on that. It's his wife's daughter that he adopted as a stepdaughter. Yeah.
So Joe Rogan's personal life aside.
Yeah, I'm not about to sit here and
I mean,
talk
his
about...
podcast
Let's talk
is
about the personal life of a guy we don't know at all.
I wish
And we
I knew
only
him
can speculate on the
personally.
details.
He's hot though.
He is hot.
He is hot, though.
He's hot.
I feel like a lot of people know him though because he's so open on his podcast.
Also,
that's great,
he is
though.
the #1 most successful podcast on earth. And in all reality,
He kind of invented it.
More or less.
he'll tell you he didn't. He actually knows the name of the guy
He's
that
modest.
was the first podcaster,
modest.
but he is an OG. He's one of the early.
He's like one of the first
guys.
successful
Yeah.
podcasters.
And I mean, he is the most successful, but also more importantly, he is like the most important talk show period on earth today. And that's not even debatable. Like he absolutely is.
Yeah.
And on a world level,
Well,
like
where else are you going to find somebody that provides a podium that is completely unbiased?
uncolored,
He'll bring
and he
anyone on there.
refuses to allow it to be colored.
Yeah, and he'll bring, and no matter how controversial of a situation somebody's in, he'll bring them on there, and he will not be a dick.
Nope.
He will
He'll
be
let them
open
talk.
to what they're going to say.
Long form conversation.
He just wants to learn.
Did you
Yeah,
see the
that's
one
so
he just
fucking
did
cool.
with Edward Snowden?
That's
Yeah.
all you need to know. So many people are like, he's a government
And-
shill, fucking
and
all the shit.
He had
Yeah,
Alex
sure he
Jones
is.
on not that long ago. Again,
He's buddies with Al. Alex is a psycho.
he
but
is, but he's a good entertainer.
He's entertaining, yeah. But either way, Joe is friends with him from the 90s. and
Well,
he
that's
has
kind
him
of
on.
that's what's sad about the state of news these days. Is
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're given real news. If you're entertaining, you'll be on there. It's
That's
like it's
why I
all
love
just a
Rogan.
reality show.
And that's why I love Rogan, because he goes on and he goes, "Oh, you're trying to buy me? Never.
Yeah, bye.
Never. Nobody's ever going to buy me. I'm going
Buy
in
this.
fully unbiased
Buy.
with no outside influence at all. And I'm just going to have on whoever and let them talk."
Yep.
You know? And there's nowhere else you're going to ever find that.
Yeah.
There's nowhere else.
Well, he knows that
true.
That's why it's the
he
most
knows that everyone deserves a voice, and every biased news corporation,
They don't let you.
if what they're saying doesn't meet their script,
Yep.
they just shut you out.
They shut you out. Yep. They'll
Look
interrupt
at
you.
Bill O'Reilly, dude.
I was just about to bring
He
him
doesn't
up,
let
yeah.
people say shit if it doesn't agree with his beliefs.
Dude, I've been getting really into Joey Diaz's podcast.
Oh my God. Oh, Joey is one of the funniest.
I'll tell you, Tom Segura. He's so fucking
Dude,
funny.
yeah.
Don't get me started on Segura.
Segura's
I love
so
Tommy
good.
He's-
Bonds, dude.
It's like this whole
He's
new-
the best
funniest.
comedian going
well,
right now.
They're not new, but it's like that group,
He's so
like that
funny.
crop of dudes, like him and Bert and Joey Diaz. A little older than that, but like like all those guys.
Rogan. Bill
I'm so into the
Burr.
stand-up shit lately.
No
like,
one can stand up to their shit right now.
All right,
No.
calm down.
Bill Burr's incredible.
Oh, that wasn't a pun. Never
Oh,
mind.
because wasn't that one of Bill Burr's fucking
No, because they do
special titles?
stand-up. That's the joke.
You
I
said,
don't know.
You said calm down. I thought that was.
Oh, there's Walk Your Way Out. That's one of them.
Oh, maybe
That's
that's what I'm
what it is,
thinking
yeah.
of.
Anyway, let me do a little
Bill's
bit of
one of the
housekeeping
best.
here. A little bit of housekeeping. This is podcast number 2.
Yep.
All right. And we've got Dave, AJ, and Brad here. And we have video this time. We'll have more video next time. And a few things we didn't mention last time that maybe you'd be interested in. This is just us talking about probably not music, but we play music. You know, the band Anabasis. We're going to have some links down below in the description so you can check our stuff out on Spotify and Bandcamp. Purchase merch on the Bandcamp if you are so inclined. And by now we should have our Patreon live. It's not super fleshed out right now. We will be offering some new stuff later on there. Any little bit of support helps, and we really do appreciate it. Or at least just listen to the music and show it to a friend you like. And that aside, Joe Rogan's hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no nudes on our Patreon unless specifically requested.
It's like the $50
We can
tier.
work
You can
something
see
out.
my feet.
It might not be nudes of us, but we'll work somehow.
Well, you really
You
only
just find like nudes of some random dude.
Maybe, I don't know.
you only want to see Dylan.
You're throwing you're rolling the dice. If you go,
Dylan's got like a
I want
lubed up
nudes
fucking,
of these out of shape fucking 30-year-old guys that play music. Okay, well, I might send you nudes, but they're probably not going to be me. I don't know who they're going to be. But
All you said was said nudes. You never said for me, dude.
You didn't even say
nudes of what?
part.
I might send you fucking Noodle's feet.
We're already off
They're
to a
bare
great
feet.
start.
I'll just send nudes of Noodle.
I just clipped
He's
wicked
jacked.
hard laughing in this mic.
Nah, you're good, dude.
You're good, dude.
We got that
Okay,
compression. All right. So
fuck.
something that we briefly had mentioned last podcast that maybe would be funny to get into is the history of like
Albany.
growing up. Yeah.
Albany, bro. Yeah, let's talk about the infrastructure. of
So the
highway.
Bloods, you see.
Yeah. No, okay. You're saying the history of what?
Growing up, listening to like Metallica and shit. Because Brad, you said you just didn't really get it.
Yep.
School me on Metallica because like all the Metallica I've ever heard, I just was never into. I understand that they had like a big impact on the metal community and basically the genre itself. I could just never like get into their music.
I can explain this probably pretty easily too.
ahead.
Okay, so Metallica is definitely the first band I ever heard that made me want to be a musician. There's just no question. I was like 4 when I first heard them, dude. I don't even remember the first time I heard them. They've just always been there.
Maybe I
through my
haven't heard
childhood,
enough,
right?
but they just seem so vanilla. It's very like verse chorus,
They
verse
might,
chorus.
They might now. They might now.
That
Also,
guttural singing you hear on K-Rock. Like I'm not.
your taste in music, like your favorite band is Between the Buried and Me. So a standard verse chorus structure is already going to steer you wrong because they'll never do that.
Well, they have been a little bit lately, but you're right.
That's okay.
You're right.
But the important things to think about is this: when Metallica came out, that sound did not exist, and if it did not exist anywhere near mainstream, let alone visible by a major audience. They're just not even close. Not even close. And then they were like so innovative in the 80s when it came to like they were not just a good like tight band at the time who was young guys that were hungry and they were doing something that hadn't existed yet, right? With like the whole thrash metal thing. But they were the band out of all of that movement that put the most focus on actually being like incredible songwriters with like where the music like took you on a journey. Like the songs were not just cheesy, generic.
I can
one-two
see how
songs.
their song structure was really solid.
Yeah,
I
their
guess-
song and so Kill 'Em All is whatever, but at the time it was just thrash and it didn't exist yet, right? And you had like Slayer, Anthrax,
You Kill 'Em
Exodus,
All,
whatever.
you can really hear like the punk roots
Yeah,
of thrash.
sure,
Because
yep.
a lot of it is like, how fast can we play? Because when you were a kid, when I was a kid, we're like 30-ish now or whatever.
Yeah,
When I was like 10, what is that, like 2000-ish or so?
yeah, almost, yeah.
Whiplash was the fastest thing I'd ever heard.
Yeah,
'Cause
and there
it was
was
like-
way better. Like there was more modern metal that sounds even more modern today happening then, but we just didn't know.
Yeah.
We had no clue.
You
we
get
were kids. We were
exposed.
children.
You start in the middle of their catalog.
You start with the easiest to find,
And you pull
which
backward.
is anytime you go, you've never listened to rock or metal ever one time, go online and find the first metal band you can. Metallica instantly, because they're the biggest of all time.
It has the word
By
metal
far,
in the name.
by far. But so important things to note with Metallica and why they're so important and why they're such a big deal is because one, they're one of the like inventors of the thrash movement. They're not the only one. They're definitely the biggest, most successful one. Two, they had arguably a lot more diverse, dynamic songwriting than anybody else in the genre. Like
Look
you had
at-
Anthrax, Slayer, Exodus were very hard-nosed, just down the middle, punch in the face thrash, and they were trying to do a lot more diverse sound while still being thrash, right?
So for you, is it more that you have a respect for the fact that they were the first to do that, or is it they had a major impact on how you view the genre and what you do now?
I think a combination of a lot of that stuff,
Yeah.
a lot of things. So it's like both of those. I respect that they were innovators of a sound, but then they came out with every album, man. It's like Kill 'Em All is cool. It's just classic, gritty, down the middle thrash, whatever. It's not really my bag anymore, but it was cool when I was like fucking 5, right? And then Ride the Lightning is where you went, these guys are a different level of songwriters than everybody else. You know what I mean? At least in that genre, right? And then they made Master of Puppets, and that's debatably the single greatest metal album of all time. It's like so perfect. It's so good. The songwriting's incredible. The wide range of the songs. Like every song is not a 2/4, just, you know what I mean, thrash beat or whatever. There's like different tempos for every song, different moods and feels to every song. The lyrical content is incredible. And it's just such a memorable, such an iconic album that just completely transformed the perception of heavy metal in the world scope of music, you know what I mean? And then they made Injustice for All, which is debatably the greatest technical thrash album of all time. It's like ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I would say Rust in Peace by Megadeth is the greatest technical thrash album of all time.
I'll get to Megadeth in a second.
But we'll get there, yeah. But you could argue Injustice for All. It's so good. Incredible songwriting, tons of odd time in a time period in music where you just weren't seeing that shit other than the prog bands.
Were they able to pull off the odd time to make it sound normal? Or
yes.
Okay. They weren't one of those bands where they're so obvious that
there's
they're
weird stuff in the song
good
Master of
songwriters.
Puppets. I think there's a
Master of Puppets goes there, and Justice for All was the farthest extent of that.
Oh yeah, some of that stuff is bananas.
And Justice for All is such a cool album if you know the details of it, because it's one of the most important members of the band in their sound was their bassist, their original bassist. He's actually not the original bassist, but everybody says he is. Ron McGovney's the original bassist. Fuck that guy. Cliff fucking Burton, man. Yeah. He was the first I would say him and what's the dude's name? Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. Is that his name, Steve Harris? Mm-hmm. Those are the first two bassists I ever heard of that were big deal because they were bass players.
Ellefson, dude.
Ellefson too, for
a whole different reason.
A whole different reason. But anywho, Cliff Burton was a big factor in the songwriting and stuff for those guys. Apparently, obviously, I wasn't fucking there. And he died very famously in a fucking bus crash while they were on tour for Master of Puppets.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that story.
And then the album they made after that was Injustice for All, and they were in a very dark place mentally. So the songs just have this tone to them.
It's
the lyrics, the sound,
so
the production.
knowing that, you can hear the reflection of it in the album.
It's like
it's
depressed
so dark.
anger.
And it's technical, prog thrash.
The first
That's
track
interesting.
It's such a good album.
First
dude.
track is Blackened, and you think about
oh my god, dude.
when that comes in, that's
Between the Buried and Me covered that song.
Yeah.
That hits you so hard right in the
That
gut.
album was so important. It was so pivotal in my development as a musician, because it showed me as a kid, if I wanted to be great, I had to know. I had to become a proficient player. I had to. And it's funny because everybody shits on Lars because he's such a sloppy mess now.
He really
but
is.
back then, he was such a fucking monster.
It seems like it had a more profound impact on your songwriting than your technical proficiency.
I would agree.
It seems
that's
like
the number one thing for them.
It
Is
seems
their
like that's when you
songwriting.
came to the realization that you're if I want to do this successfully, I need to know how to write a song that resonates with people. Because that's what you talk about all the time.
Yeah, songwriting is so important, and nobody focuses on it.
I'm gonna jump into this part and say my Metallica thing. That was the first thing that I got into outside of listening to the radio. My cousin brought over the Black album, and he played guitar, so I ended up getting a bass, and that's where I've stuck. And I was like, this is pretty cool. What does their other stuff sound like? And then I got Master of Puppets, and I was like, oh, this is the good stuff. I see. So I can understand, if you're not super well versed with all of their earlier material, because that's where the gold is.
I'm not versed with any of it.
That's the thing.
Oh, my God. The gold is the old stuff.
Kill 'Em All was 83.
Yeah.
And then Ride the Lightning was 84. So 84 to 88, those 3 records, Ride the Lightning, Master Puppets, and Justice, that is the sweet spot. That's where I learned all the stuff I learned. So here's the thing, like, at the time I thought it was all, and it was at the time before I was born, revolutionary. I was like, I've never heard something like this. Like, it's heavy, but it's melodic.
Didn't exist until they did
It's got dynamic. Like, the singing is like kind of one note, but it's really well executed. And then when you watch them live, like, Hetfield is flawless as far as I remember.
He's the best person in that band by
his
far.
His right hand is still monster. He downpicks almost everything.
He's
at
so
his
good
crotch
live.
while he's fucking singing all these different rhythms over it. Like, that's
super
so
tight
crazy.
live. He never fucks shit up, and he's good. He's good at singing
so good.
over his stuff. He's so good. He's one of the best, like, singing while playing guys of all time.
So, like, the stuff that I realize now as somebody who tries to be an educated musician, like, they're not doing anything, or they weren't doing anything super crazy songwriting wise. Like, I love Between the Buried and Me too. Obviously, they're in my top 5 or whatever, top 3. But I love that they can do whatever they want and get away with it, and it sounds great. But Metallica, like, if you look at a lot of their songs, it's not that far out of the box. It's like riff, verse, chorus.
It's just a little
riff,
bit
verse,
out.
chorus. And then they'll throw in like a longer bridge or an extended part, and then come back and hit you with the chorus and the riff. It's that ABA kind of song structure stuff that we're all familiar with, but the musicianship that they had at the time, because remember, this was all done on tape. Like, they didn't have all the stuff that we have now. We could fake an album in a day. We could just basically program every note if we wanted to.
I recorded that Perpetual Burn album, and I didn't know the riffs, and I recorded all that, and it's all technical death
It was
metal.
like one
And you
note
punched
at a
in
time.
like 3 notes at a
Bro,
time.
all patchwork to just make it sound right.
So the fact that that stuff was coming out at that time is just so next level. And I mean, like, I grew up on like 3 out of the big 4, because, like, who really actually cares about Anthrax? So like,
That's
Slayer,
funny because I always said there's nothing Slayer could do to interest me, and I loved Anthrax.
we're gonna have to talk about that.
Yeah.
So, you know, Slayer, and then I also was into like Maiden and stuff, but that's as far as it went. And there was something different about each one of those bands. So, like, the influence that Cliff
They're all
supposedly
very
had was
important. They're all very
I guess
important.
where that differs for me is that when I was coming into metal, I wasn't listening to things that were recorded before I was born.
There you go.
there it is.
I
you
was
go,
only
man.
listening to what was modern at the time.
And that's all
which
that
is
you need to
totally
say.
legitimate.
And it was
Yeah.
like Between the
Totally
Buried and Me,
legit.
it was like August Burns Red, it was
Yep.
As I Lay Dying.
If
Yeah.
that's the stuff that
And
you get
all
into,
great bands.
Yeah,
if that's the
Every
stuff
one
you
of
get
them's
into,
gonna go Metallica.
I feel like you can trade, like, As I Lay Dying is a perfect example. Song structure,
Oh, yeah.
riffs, like all those pedal riffs and stuff.
I love
if you
that
trace
band.
that back and you just turn the dial on your time machine back 15, 20 years, it's just Metallica songs, just with a heavier edge and a few more pedal riffs.
Better production.
And all those guys will
Modern
tell
production.
you,
Their production
oh,
was really good.
Really
even
good, even
back
for the
in like
time.
even
Yep.
before they
late
tried to kill their
90s.
wives
Yeah.
or whatever.
Well,
and they'll even tell you,
Sometimes they gotta go.
all all the guys in As I Lay Dying, though, if you ask them, and, you know, like, Guitar World makes a big deal out of this stuff because they're stuck in the past. They're crusty old blues dudes.
Yep.
You ask the
Big
guitarist or the drummer or the singer from As I Lay Dying, like, who were your influence when you're growing up? They're like,
Hatfield or
Metallica,
Hammett.
Yeah.
Hatfield or Hammett,
Megadeth,
one of them.
Slayer.
It's
Yeah,
actually
just
funny.
saying.
I spent like fucking 8 hours cleaning my garage 2 weeks ago, and I put on As I Lay Dying's An Ocean Between Us. I think the
That was a
album
good
was
record.
Wicked good album.
It was a good record, but I got to like 2.5 songs, and I was kind of
It's the way I feel about August Burns Red now.
But that's
like, when
the thing,
they
man.
when they came out, they blew my mind out my asshole. And then by the time they hit Leveler, I just stopped listening because they're still incredible. It's not for me anymore.
dude. Thrill Seeker was like a groundbreaking album at the time
Yeah.
because they were all like 20.
I mean, even Messengers was like, holy shit.
Yeah, Messengers was like when they really it's
young
like Thrill.
and
Yeah,
playing
Thrill
good
Seeker
shit.
was when they were like, we're the real deal.
They're really
And then
fucked up.
Messengers was like, this is when everyone knows we're the real deal.
Here's what's crazy about that conversation, though. You're talking about these like early 2000s young, hungry bands that were doing modern shit at the time, cutting edge, right? You think that like
they were
As I Lay
later
Dying and
2000s.
August Burns Red and all these bands were doing that stuff, right? And then what you forget about is that the same time that was going on, Protest the Hero was making music and they
Yo,
were 15.
They
and
had that
their
song.
sound was what the fuck?
They had that song "Heretics and Killers," where it was
Dude,
like
what the fuck? They were so
And
ahead of the
I remember
curve.
like my buddy hooked me up with this mix CD that he had, and that song was one of them. It was "Heretics and Killers" from Protest the Hero, and I was in some shit hardcore band at the time. And I didn't know what the song was, but I would play it on repeat and be like, "This is so nasty." And finally, I showed it to him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that's Protest the Hero." And that's when
They're
I
so
finally
nuts.
looked into the rest of their shit. Dude.
They are one of the
First-
most influential bands of all time
Also,
on modern music.
one of the
It's
tightest-
just not debatable.
tightest bands I've ever seen live, and
They're
they're
unreal.
super dry. There's not a
Unreal.
drop of reverb, nothing.
They're unreal.
And the guy
man.
he's just playing all this crazy, like I think it's Luke,
constant. Their riffs are just solos.
I
that
feel
are
like they're one of those bands that
Constant
like
16
and he doesn't
sweeps
even
and
break a
shit.
sweat. He's just like, yep.
they exist like on the outside of the
Yep.
sphere of.
And I don't know why.
You know why?
They don't break in, but
And
when
I-
you
I don't
actually
get it.
look at
I
it,
don't agree with this, but the reason is because of Rhodey's vocals. That's the only reason.
He's one of the most influential vocalists of all time.
I'm
on
not
modern
disagreeing
singers.
with you. What I'm saying is the only reason they're not mega mainstream successful in the rock world is because they're a little weird for
No,
some people.
I think it's that people just aren't ready for it. They're
Yeah.
intimidated by it.
Oh,
they hear it
that
and they
is
go,
music.
I can't understand that, so it's not going to be part of my
It
regular
just whips
playlist.
over your head, and there's nothing you do
did
about
you
it.
did
Yeah.
you get really deep into
It's kind of like the Human Abstract. They were like the
Yeah.
same fucking thing.
yeah, what was the
Yep.
newer record they did?
I'm
The
not
water based one, Pacific Myth. Did you listen to that?
No.
You need to listen to that front to back 6 times. It's more like an EP length. It's shorter, but all the production, like their production's always been a little like drier, a little bit like higher pitch, which is totally cool for how crazy fast they play. But they're friends, supposedly they're friends with Aaron Marshall from Intervals,
Oh,
and one of their mutual friends tracked the bass on it when the other guy A-Riff left. And they use all of like those types of patches and sounds and mix on the newer record, that Pacific Myth. So
Oh,
it sounds like
whoa.
Intervals, but like in a band setting
But
with
their music?
vocals.
I just remember like
It's so bananas.
I remember the first time I heard Vela Together We Await the Storm, which also is like one of the coolest fucking song names ever. Like that's so fucking cool. And then Harbinger and Mea Culpa, like that whole album. What was that? Oh, Nocturne was
Yes,
that
that
the
was
album
it.
they came out with. Just unbelievable playing.
Which is so funny because that stuff's unbelievable and it's got more of like a classical bent to it and it's more
very
proggy.
very neoclassical.
And
yeah.
at the same
Yep.
time I was getting into that, I got into After the Burial, which is Dave's favorite joke ever because of that new riff they have on Evergreen.
oh.
And,
What's that song called? King or something like that?
Behold the Crown.
Behold the Crown. Yeah, it's just pinch harmonic city.
The
Which
funniest,
I love.
The funniest thing is like I was getting into that at the same time I was getting into like
That
human
was
abstract
wicked
and shit.
funny.
So
Because they used to shred before the
Yeah.
guy unfortunately passed away.
Yeah, yeah.
They used to shred
That is a
really
really
hard.
dark
Like
story,
that
man.
whole record, I caught on to them
and I don't hate After the Burial
when they put their
anymore.
second record out.
I just
which
love
was,
pinch harmonic riffs.
What was the second? Rare Form. And there was just they would play these crazy breakdowns and weird time signatures, which at the time that was like the core thing. That was like what the cool kids did, you know.
So
Just the story on that real quick. We were coming back from a run in New Jersey and
Yes. in Maryland.
And Maryland.
Yeah.
And I was in the back seat of the car and I was introduced to this song basically with the comedic setup that it was going to be the most ridiculous pinch harmonic riffs I've ever heard in my whole life.
And it was correct.
Yeah, but that was my first introduction to After the Burial, so it would be very hard pressed for me to come back to that band and give them any credibility, only
Which is a
because
bummer.
the first time I ever heard them
Yeah,
was
was
Dave
that
going,
fucking-
dude, listen how ridiculous this is.
So, real quick, because we could talk about this stuff and just follow that
Okay.
train forever.
Wait,
and I'd
wait,
love
wait.
to, but I want to wrap up some stuff with
let's
the
finish
Metallica
that
thing. Okay.
So the thing is, what we can do for you is Dave and I can each give you 10 songs, and if they overlap, then just
For
count.
Metallica?
Yeah.
Well, you guys already gave me 2 albums, then it's gonna be
Okay.
Ride the Lightning, and what was the other one?
no, Master of Puppets and Justice for All.
Exactly.
Those are the
Okay,
albums.
those two.
And
Master
in
of
that
Justice for All, yeah.
that order as well.
So I want to say a couple things about them though that are important though.
Let me
that
cut
are
you off.
stuff I always talk about. Go ahead first.
So the
though.
songwriting, what my point was, they aren't doing anything structure-wise that's too far out of the box, but the way that they take the standard, like you're in a minor key, here's your 1-7-6-5 chord. They use that all over the place. Kansas uses that. Chicago uses that. Everybody
And those are
uses
their
that.
Also a
influences.
great band.
Those
All
are their
great.
influences.
The
man.
way
Thin
they
Lizzy
use
and
it
shit.
and the way they frame it is what I'm getting at. That's like what was so revolutionary as a
Yes.
kid. You hear this stuff and you're
Yes.
like, I've heard this before. It feels familiar. The
Yep.
main lick to
So they
Sanitarium.
kind of like they
resonates.
bridged that gap.
Yes.
They really take
Yes.
that pop sensibility of like, I've heard this chord progression before, and you listen to Sanitarium and you're like, why does this sound familiar? But I've never heard this. And then you're like, oh, this is just the same descending
Such a good
thing.
Well, that's like the nature of music, though. There's only fucking
So much you can
There's
do.
only
Yeah.
12 notes that anyone's ever. That's what amazes me.
in the West.
Well, okay, yeah.
No, I know.
there-
Okay.
there's-
I know,
yeah.
I know.
Gonna get into some
Thanks,
bullshit
AJ.
microtonal stuff.
Right.
Dude, there's
So-
some crazy rhythmic
But that's
concepts,
like
though.
Get
that's
outta
the thing
here.
that bugs me out is when I listen to
Conical.
bands like we're talking about like Protest the Hero and Between the Buried and Me, when I think about the fact that they're only working with the same amount of notes that
You
we
look
are,
at your guitar and you're like, what the fuck am I doing with my life?
literally, I just want to
feel
like
like-
just quit it and go work at Dunder Mifflin.
The
That's
reason-
always bummed me out though, because I feel like that does such a disservice to the reality
Yeah.
of songwriting.
Of-
because
What do you mean?
when the more you learn music theory, the more you realize that you're not working with 12 notes. You're working with all of this rich theory that never ends, and that's the reality.
But what you have to
Yeah.
do is
That's
you have
why
to,
it's endless.
That's true,
you have
Yeah.
to take that part. I'm going to get into this in a minute.
Yeah,
Metallica
and
will give
continue.
you songs and we'll get you indoctrinated. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But I think you're going to, the person you are, you'll respect it. You'll be like, oh, I get it. Or like,
So-
Yeah.
So I'll report in the next podcast
Yep.
my response to
Okay.
those two albums.
So let me say this real quick about Metallica too. He's leaving out a very important album to take in as well, which is the Black Album. Now, the Black Album is where they had a very dramatic change in their sound, right? And they went way left field, and they went a lot more pop sensibility, slower songs, whole different feel than the tech thrash thing, right?
don't get me wrong. That album is
Oh,
a
it's
masterpiece.
incredible. Yep.
It's just not the stuff that
It's not. The,
I would
yep.
choose to put on.
So the reason it's important as much as Injustice for All, and I always say their best three albums are Master of Puppets, Injustice for All, Black Album. The reason all three are important is because they show dramatic, like, changes in their stylings, right? Master of Puppets is like their what people would consider their best like Metallica work, and Justice for All is like the farthest extent of the technical thrash side of that work, and then Black Album is the farthest extent of the like kind of digestibility of that work, right? Something I always talk to you guys about, and that I'm always very careful in our music, is about the songwriting and stuff, but about one specific thing that I think Metallica might be one of the biggest influences on, and that is creating moments. And that is what I want you to listen for, is that Metallica did something that no one else did at the time, especially in thrash. They were focused on creating moments.
That'll be
memorable
interesting for me
moments.
because any of my Metallica experience, I didn't get that, but it's also not very vast how much I've listened to.
Yep.
It's and this isn't on your listening list, but and this is kind of a deep cut for most people. The last track on Ride the Lightning, these guys are like 22 or younger.
If even.
They
Yeah.
put out a song. It's an instrumental song called Call of Cthulhu, and it's like loosely based on like the Lovecraft lore.
Very
It's
cool
an all
song.
instrumental, and the way that it builds, it's a little drawn out maybe now.
They
by
would do
today's standards.
instrumentals on like every album too. That was so good back then.
It's incredible how much they get away with for only tracking like traditional instruments. Like they don't use strings, they didn't use software.
And
That
there's
shit didn't exist.
obvious
So that's
movement
that's pretty
to it.
impressive.
It goes somewhere. You're on a journey. Like it's just
and it's
two
only
guitars,
like
a
three
bass,
riffs.
and drums.
It's like three riffs,
Yeah,
and the whole song
but you
carries
can
your
feel
attention.
the pace. Yeah. So what I mean by moments too, something Metallica did was they teach you when you're a kid and you've never heard it before. They were like innovators of types of moments. So like the ending of a song that slows down and goes into like a big fucking like
Creeping Death.
resolution
Creeping
or something
Death
like
is the
Creeping
song for that.
Death is such a good example of that. Yep.
It's kind of a. Go ahead.
A perfect moment, and it's
They're like a history lesson in how to write moments.
I mean,
yeah.
where we live is a part of New York where we have a radio station that plays hard rock. So we grew up. They did mandatory Metallica every Monday. They'd play tracks.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And whether or not they got a little old to you is your taste or your flavor. But there's
Yeah,
the
whatever.
song "Sad but True." Everybody knows the song. If you think about moments in the very beginning of that song, when they hit that snare fill, like. That's such a huge
Yeah, man.
no, like I had as a kid, and then mind you, I wasn't listening to like the new metal stuff when I was a kid, but it was out, like I got into Mudvayne, I got into System of a Down,
Mudvayne's
Slipknot,
sick.
all that kind of shit.
System of a Down was
System of a Down's good too.
They were
all
so
those
nasty.
bands,
They're
yeah.
all so
nasty, so good.
I don't think of it, but they are influential like
Oh,
on
yeah.
me and like the way that I play. Like Ryan Martin,
He's
however you say
so
that,
good.
from
I
Mudvayne.
do.
He's a monster. He's an alien. He's not real.
I think System of a Down played the craziest shit they got away with on the radio.
Yes.
Yes. And you know what's funny too is if you look at the songs, they're a perfect
so all
example
over the place.
of attitude is what carries the songs. Because
Yes.
I was in like a death metal band, and we covered Prison Song, the first song off Toxicity. And when
That
you
was such a good
scream
album.
when you scream those lyrics and you play that in like a drop A instead of drop C, and you add like that kind of beat to it, it's like the heaviest thing ever, and it's all attitude because it's just open 1-3 on that low string. There's nothing to that song. Anyway, those moments are. I don't feel like I'm a good songwriter. I feel like I'm good at working with you guys, at least in the capacity I work in this band. Like I'll add to what you guys do, or I'll accentuate it. But those moments are something that I appreciate about what you guys try to write, or whoever writes whatever song, because they do stick out. And it maybe that's what keeps me hooked into trying to improve the song.
When I write
lens.
songs, when I write like when I'm working with us to try to write an album as a team and stuff like that, that's like the number one thing I'm always trying to focus on is how to, like, what moments are we getting to, and how are we going to create memorable moments for the listener, you know?
So what's interesting to me, though, it kind of like there's parallels to how we enjoy these moments and how they make us feel. Mm-hmm. I know that, you know, we've already said that Between the Buried and Me is one of my favorite bands of all time.
Oh, yeah.
It's common knowledge that what they typically do is move in and out of genres, and there's not a lot of continuity in their songs, but they do have an ability to create moments.
They create moments
that are kind of unexpected, and you almost didn't know that. But so a little backstory.
Yeah, I
like
never gave them.
So our singer lives an hour away from us. When we started the band, Dave and I we'd commute together.
Yep.
And we started doing this thing where we'd listen to an album every time we did it. And one of the albums I did was I did Colors from Between the Buried and Me, and I did The Great Misdirect.
Great
So
Misdirect, man.
So if you listen to the song White Walls, it's 14 minutes of just like almost absolute nothing. But there is a common theme that really comes to this culmination at the end that is almost liberating. Like the moment's so huge.
Yeah.
Or if you listen to like Son of Nothing or Ants of the Sky or
That
Disease,
whole
Injury,
record
Madness.
Great Misdirect
start to finish
is
on
incredible.
Colors.
It's really crazy to me that we're talking about these moments, and it's a little bit like it's very subjective, because to me those are the moments that I look for, where it almost comes out of, like, for you you're looking for something that's built to the entire time. For me it's almost like,
but that's just my preference.
this is going to be a weird analogy, but it's almost like playing a video game, right?
Okay.
Like you can be going through this crazy firefight battle shit, and you don't really know what's going on, and then it opens up to the big story culmination.
Yeah.
To me, that's what Between the Buried and Me is like, because you're confused,
It's
and
chaos.
then finally,
orchestrated chaos.
finally. But for your style, it's like you can kind of see it coming the whole time. So it's just a different thing. It's like it's moments all the same, but it's just how you do it.
It's different ways of getting to big moments.
I feel like
it's all about just having memorable moments.
There's just so many ways to skin a cat.
The thing for
I've
me
tried 'em all.
Between the Buried and Me is that they can just weave themes in and out of songs, and then they can
They're
do
amazing.
a callback to it literally 4 minutes later, and you're like, this is seamless.
And they're getting better at it.
Colors was cool. I feel like when we listened to Colors,
Did you listen to Alaska though? Because
that was the first time I ever heard them.
That's the transition you need to hear. You need
No,
to
I
hear
did
Alaska,
hear it.
then
I've heard
Colors, then Great
I've heard
Misdirect.
Alaska many times before. That
Yeah.
was like the first album I ever heard by them, and that was kind of what made me go, okay, this band's good. They're talented, but it's not really where my headspace is at the time that I found it. Right?
Pat will,
I was
Pat
in a
will
different
tell you
direction,
Silent
right?
Circus, but he's
So
a mad lad.
anywho, then I heard.
Mad lad.
So then I heard Colors with you in the car commuting, and I went, "Oh, this is the band that I think of when I think
That's
of
when
them,
they
right?
started getting thematic.
Yes,
They
and this
started
is the band
thinking
I
bigger
think
picture.
of, right?
Yeah.
But Great Misdirect was the first album that you played for me by them that made me be like, "Oh shit!" And again, they are not a band that I go to listen to, like, as a regular listen. It's like an experience. I have to sit through the whole thing, or it doesn't quite reveal itself to me.
I think for you, if you haven't spent time with the record, a really good one for your sensibilities and the way that I feel like you enjoy or interpret or write music, Coma Ecliptic.
I love that album.
That's one for you.
Yeah, I love that
for
album.
sure.
Yeah, I've listened to that whole album a couple times. The bassist from my old band, Grant, we all know Grant. I know AJ knows Grant real well.
That kid kills me.
BT Bam
So
is
good.
his favorite band of all time too, and he always wanted me to listen to the Parallax albums.
Oh,
Those are his best albums.
They are incredible.
That's probably my favorite is 2, Parallax.
So Parallax 2 is the
new one's
one that
incredible,
I
though.
listen to more, and I'm a big fan of that album.
The new one should have been one record.
I'll always say, and I'll always maintain that I don't think their sound is for me and what I look for when I'm listening to music generally. But the amount of respect I have for those guys is so it's unmeasurable.
I guess
They're
that kind of
geniuses.
plays into my point though, because they create these large moments. You're a moment guy, but it's not for you, but it is for
and
me.
that's okay.
So that leaves us in a position where it's difficult because it's like we want to provide these moments, but how do you know that you're catering to the right crowd? How do you know you're creating the right moments for the right people?
Sure,
it's kind of it's an enigma where there's a little bit of a magic about it where there's part of it where you just gotta hope that you nail it. You think you do,
you almost do a little
and
for everybody.
What you do is the same thing they do, and I would disagree with that. I think you do it for yourself, and I think that's what every great band does. I think that between the Buried and Me, they are making the music they want to make because it's what is fulfilling to them.
Well,
they could give a fuck
It's
with the
their
response.
path.
Well, what I meant is
Correct.
you don't
Yep.
pander. I'm
Yes,
saying
they don't pander to
because
anybody.
because you check enough different boxes just naturally,
Yes.
there is something for everybody. Like we went to see, what was it, Between the Buried and Me?
That's something
Tesseract,
we try to do
and
as well.
And you're not the hugest fan, and you had to work, so like you bounced out, but you stayed for a song or two. And there's probably
There was
something,
no way I wasn't going to stay to see.
there's something that you're going to be able to grip onto, whether it's just. And I gotta say, like I've seen them probably 10+ times. Their raw musicianship is fucking
oh my God.
undeniable.
Dude, Blake
they are
is one of the
robotic,
best drummers
perfect.
in the world.
Every single member, there is
he
no
is.
weak link in that band. All 5 of those guys are fucking top tier,
They're
world class
incredible.
musicians.
Incredible musicians.
The one thing that made me, well, there was a lot before this, but the one thing that really was like the icing on the cake when I was watching Paul Wagner play the last time I saw them was he was doing one of his solos, and I had learned this solo. It was Selke's The Endless Obsession.
Yep.
And it was like the smooth jazz solo. So there's like some hammer-on and pull-offs in there that
is
when
Selke's on Alaska?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought so.
And it, to me, that's like the most thematic song on there. Like that's
Correct.
the one song that actually has a big melodic.
It's like the least death metal song
Right.
on there.
So cool. I remember watching him, and I had learned the solo, and I would have to move my hand around really fast to hit these hammer-on pull-offs. And then I watched Paul Wagner play it, and he was hitting the hammer-on pull-offs with his fucking ring finger and pinky. And it was as audible
That's
and loud.
called technique development.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's just brute practice and making sure that
There's
all
no
4 of
other
your
way.
fingers are equally
No
strong.
other way to get there.
But it was at that point that I realized that the reason they're so robotic good is just because they know how to practice. Like perfect
They're
practice
so
makes
well
perfect, right?
practiced, so well
to think
rehearsed.
it was like news to me that your pinky could be as strong as your middle finger.
Oh.
I didn't fucking realize that
Yeah,
at
you-
first.
Just
You
gonna
gotta
come with
play
practice,
bass sometime,
man.
dude.
Um,
Well, I want to
What's-
play. I want to play an instrument people hear, but
Oh yeah, my bad.
what's the song that's like? Ba, 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 ba,
Is that foam board?
no, that's
What is that?
That's off Parallax 2.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
that
that's,
song is incredible.
It's not Layer Goes to Rest.
I don't know the names. I just know the damn record
Is it
front to back.
It's not Astro Body.
No, I think that was a sample.
That was the first song I ever heard by that band that made me be like, these guys are geniuses. Because
That
the
is
way
such an amazing
the
melodic
part
progression.
when it all comes down and it's just bass and drums playing a nasty fucking groove, and then that like the guitars playing like the clean like plucked chords of that progression, and that's the chorus pretty much.
What's so great about that part when the clean guitars come in? So
Mm-hmm.
contrary motion is like the oldest trick in the book for music, but you don't hear it a lot in this style of music. And what they do is, so the first note they hit the octave, right, root and octave. But then what they do is the higher note drops down a
and
whole
the
step,
lower note goes up, the contrary.
and they
motion, yep.
but they do that throughout the entire riff, and you kind of just adjust your hand position to make it work the whole time. And then to put the icing on the cake, they create an augmented chord at the end where they slide up to a major chord where it should be a minor based on that scale.
Sure, yep.
Just-
Tension, brother. Yeah.
The
Good writing.
the simplicity. Oh, man, it's so fuck. I can't even like
It's
say
just,
it.
it
It's
just
so
comes.
fucking
It just
good.
comes with
I
experience.
just wish I
and
understood how
knowledge,
they
you
sit
know?
down and write a song.
Skill.
It's just it's just
I have no clue, man.
it's
They're
so
very
far
good.
beyond me.
And when they talk about how they write their stuff, they always, and maybe it's just because they're humble, but you can tell that they look up to these great geniuses of progressive music.
They don't realize
and
that
they
they're
don't
one of them.
realize that they are one of them. Yes. And
Another-
they will always go down in history
it's like
as
them-
one of the really great, important progressive bands ever.
It's just them and Opeth for me, dude. Like, I don't even know who's number
Opeth is
one.
another gigantic
So
band.
before we get into that, two last things that I think are super fucking cool about BT Bam
Yep.
is that their bass player Dan Briggs writes
Oh my God! He's
almost
so
all
good.
of their music.
Is that real?
Yeah,
He's so fucking good.
What?
I'm just so mad.
he writes like 90%
I'm
of their
so
music.
mad that I play bass and he can do circles around me intellectually and technique. The guy is just
what a fucking
so
savage!
good.
I just assumed that a
when
lot
we
of it was
saw
from
them,
the
by the way,
guitarists.
when we saw them last time, he
Yeah.
had a glove on his left hand because he like cut himself like while cooking or something, and he still nailed every
just
single
have
one of
no
those
clue, yeah,
impossible
no clue.
notes. They played Fossil Genera, and he has that crazy solo in there. Like the guy's just unfucking touchable. And the best part for me being
Does
a
backing vocals too, doesn't he? And
No,
synths and
Paul
shit?
does.
What
He-
the
Paul does
fuck?
backing vocals.
Paul does backing vocals, but he does backing.
he does keys.
Oh, that's right.
But
yeah.
what drives me crazy, but I really respect is like our band. We're gear nerds, right? Like
try
some
to
of us
be.
are.
You are.
I am. You
It's
are.
me and you.
Yeah.
We're wicked bad gear nerds, and it doesn't make us play better, but it might make my job a little easier.
It
to
helps
play
us
something.
all do a lot of things.
The
a
guys
lot
in BT
better.
Bam don't give a shit, and it's so. To me, it's like I splash that water on my
Here's
face every
the
once in a
thing.
while. I've rewatched their rig rundown, like it was the rigged. It was the Gear Gods one that Trey Xavier does. I've rewatched that same one from a few years ago like 10 times because it's like refreshing. It's like, hey,
You got to understand.
we still
something, though.
use what works. We use 2 of everything that works in case one breaks, and that's the fuck everything.
You
That's
got to
it.
understand.
That's
though,
everything.
You got to understand. Their sound is based around a lot of basic elements used to create insanely complex music. Like they have, here's our clean tone, here's our rhythm tone, here's our lead tone. That's it.
In the past, yeah. It's a little different now, but
And then if there's an effect somewhere, it's just a stomp pedal for this one part or whatever, right? That's not that big of a deal. What we're talking about that are game changers when it comes to gear is never going to be your amp or your cabinet. You're talking about your in-ear rigs and your click tracks and stuff, and they have that.
Yeah.
So you can't look at it like because they're using a more traditional style of like gear, they still have the modern necessities
Oh,
for
no,
being
no.
the tightest band you can
Absolutely.
be. You know what
but
I mean?
I guess what I'm trying to say is, as much as it pains me to admit it, because I am like a confessed gear whore.
Mm-hmm.
But like, did you ever see when Devin did those videos? Devin Townsend did like the gear whore videos, and he would talk about.
I don't remember those.
There's a video where he's talking about one of the guitars Warwick Framus made him. He's just like gear whore, gear whore. He's just like holding the guitar up. I fucking love
Those guitars they made them are insane.
Anyway,
too.
no matter how good the gear is, if you don't know how to play it, it doesn't fucking
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
And I learned that in
they have
college
a
too. That's a whole
large
different story.
emphasis on how they play.
Dan, for example, Dan Briggs is like, I've never even tried to learn half of those lines because it's not like I can't do them. It's just like I'll never make them sound as good as he does. It's just
I don't think that's true. But
he's been so consistent in his writing style and his ability to perform these. They're not even like the craziest thing ever, but a lot of them are just so intricate, or like it doesn't rep. It's just like one, and then it's a through line, and then another through
you
line.
know who reminds me a lot of Dan, and all of the everything you're saying about him
Is it Grant?
is Grant.
Fucking hate
so
Where
what,
he's just
what-
a
I saw
genius
it-
songwriter.
what I'm getting
wrote
at, though, is
everything in
Dan
Burn.
Briggs has played the same Sun Model T head and the
Yep.
same 5-string Spectre bass for like 20 years, and none of that stops him. So that's a perfect example of gear doesn't make you
He found
better.
his sound.
New stuff doesn't necessarily have to
Well,
give you inspiration.
What bass did you just get?
I just got that groove line that Ibanez,
Yep.
which they don't make anymore.
Yeah.
Just a whole.
You could go. That's a desert island bass, man. That's the feel you want,
which is hilarious
and you
because
love gear.
I'm a
but
pretentious dick, and I've always played 6 or 7 strings, and I'm trying to scale back for our music because our music, I don't know if anyone interprets it this way, but I feel like our music is pretty fucking dense. We got 6 guys on stage at any given time.
Mm-hmm.
If I can get away with a 5-string bass, which I definitely can for our material,
very much can.
I should just do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like if you can play a more complicated, harder to play instrument at this level, if you play the easier to play instrument, you can play that same level. It gets bumped up. Like, for example, the 6-string bass, I have to bend my wrist a weird way. With the 5-string, I don't. So guess what? I can play more fluidly. And it almost sounds like a cop-out, but really I don't know. It just makes my job a lot easier.
So I saw an interview with Dan Briggs one time, and somebody basically asked him how he comes up with his bass lines that literally don't follow the guitar lines. Mm-hmm. And he had this really insightful, quote basically about how he'll look at the lines that Paul Wagner will write and what he does. And this is amazing to me because it sounds like chaos, but he has the ability to literally take these chaotic lines and find some sort of melodic passage within
the
it.
groove.
And he intentionally, like, it's not an accident, he intentionally works within that. Like, it's when he tries to write a bass line to one of their guitar lines, he purposely does not follow it, which you don't hear. Like, in a thrash band, all the stringed instruments, they're pretty much doing the same
100%.
thing, right?
Yep.
Yeah, he says,
Especially,
fuck
yes.
that, and he basically does whatever he can to try to find a melodic line where there is no melody.
It's something I try to do with AJ so much
It's
in our
like-
music.
I'll
is
tell you
find
what
the
it is,
rhythm,
dude.
find the
Innovation's
soul.
unbelievable.
I'll tell you 100% what that is, at least in my opinion, and I'm probably wrong. It's fine, but it's because he played jazz. He was in jazz band in like high school and shit. And you know what's funny? I never did that, and I regret not doing organized. Like,
I never played jazz in
I'd
school.
love
either. I
to
wish
tell
I
you you're
did.
wrong because that's like my favorite thing to do, but you're probably right at that point.
jazz, I feel and this is like, take my words with a grain of salt because I don't fucking know anything, but jazz for a bass player, I feel like is like, that's the pinnacle. Like, that's it as far as being able to do like free improvisation. The guys that do like the scat stuff, if you've ever seen that, I don't know, a lot of people might think it looks ridiculous, but what that is, if you don't understand, the guy will like scat the line as he plays it because the instrument isn't even there. So the guy's a horn, the guy is a saxophone, the guy is a vocal melody. If he's playing a jazz standard, he knows those chord changes. He doesn't even care. They don't matter. I mean, the joke is, yeah, they're all the same. It's all 2-5-1. That's not really how it works because I don't understand jazz. It's impossible to me, and I wish I was a better player. But the guy will go like, and that's Donna Lee. He'll just play that. He doesn't even look. He just does it because he's thinking it. He's thinking in that scat, that
crazy.
melody, so he can just do it. Like,
Well, that's like a transcendence where your instrument is just an extension
And there's
of your
con-
brain.
you're
all
so
kinds of
well-versed,
crazy
yeah.
guys like
comes
Matthew
with
Garrison and
experience
all
and-
these dudes. It's just like Victor Bailey was a big
So-
one. These guys are untouchable.
To me, that's a conversation about. It's about like the role of a bass player in a band, right? And you have your. So let me
I'm
talk
working
about
real
this,
hard
though.
to learn it.
I'm a big proponent of, especially in writing, and especially in writing our music, and having the bass and drums lock and do their thing that supports the antics, if you will, of the rest of the guitar work in the band, right? That way you guys have the freedom to write a riff that can be chords and synchronized with us, or it can be linear notes, or it can be scale runs and shit, whatever you guys do. And then me and him will determine the groove and the pace of the song by our connection of our parts, right? Not everybody does that, obviously.
Well, I think that's a new thing that's coming out in a lot of prog metal these days. Is if you look at the
I'm glad you're saying that because
if
that's
you
what
look
I was
at the
getting at.
yeah, if you look at the 2000s, it was all just syncopated the entire time.
Yep.
But if you look at, I've been fucking obsessed with Caligula's Horse lately.
Oh yeah, dude, great band.
That's what they do. Their bass player and
Caligula's
drums are
Horse is
locked the
awesome.
entire time, and it gives the guitar players all the freedom they need.
Yep.
And they're not carrying the
the-
rhythmic line.
Here's something funny about that. A band that will have the bassist and drummer, and I'm not saying that this is how they write it. I don't know how they write their songs. What the end sound seems like is like you're taking the bass and drum groove that's the support system for it, and then the guitarists go, we're just going to have all the riffs be the bass part that he wrote for the bass, and that's Tesseract.
Yeah.
All their riffs,
That's like the
riffs are
extreme of
just.
the rhythmic.
That's what I mean. That's like taking it to the extreme and leaning towards focusing on what that bass and drum groove is going to be. The guitarists kind of just lock with that, right? And not always. They Tesseract is a really good example of a moments band too. You know, that's not for everybody and is a specific sound, but they have their moments.
So what Tesseract did in the song Singularity is something that I think falls in line with that, but they turned it on its head. So they have this moment where they start this entire groove, and then before the song actually starts, they literally flip it completely upside down, and it's really hard to follow the change.
Yeah.
But they immediately follow into this amazing groove that covers the rest of the song. So that's like at least a good way. I wish they would do more of that, because that's at least a good way of
That's also their best album by far.
yeah,
Altered State.
But it's a good way of
It's a
being
masterpiece.
vibey while also still being able to catch attention, which is a tough line to walk.
Tesseract is and that's really important what you just said. Tesseract is a great band that is trying to walk a line that's a really tough line to walk. You know, they're trying to balance between this vibe and this sound, and the thing is they have a very narrow pathway that they go down in their sound. You know, it's a lot of the same. It's a lot of those groovy style riffs. It just you kind of. It's tough, you know. You'll listen to a song and you go, "Isn't that the riff they just fucking played the last song?" And it's not, right? It's not the same riff, but it might as well be, because
like
they're
an
so locked
evolution
in the
of it, or
same stuff.
They'll flip the snare over, or whatever.
Yeah.
And like I respect that,
and
as,
that's their sound.
as trying
that's their
to do
thing.
that kind of thing. I get that, and that's why I still listen to them. It's just I won't necessarily reach for them over somebody I'm more comfortable with.
It's
just because
it's
like math rock with less notes.
I also
Kinda,
think
yeah.
I also think that maybe you guys might maybe overstate or overestimate the importance of that band to me, because I'm not as big of a fan of that band as I think I get perceived for.
no, I mean you're fine.
What I like about that band is the way they do the gent thing.
Yes, because it's
And
not.
I don't think that they're the best band in the world
Do you
or
know
anything
what's-
like that. I think they're great.
Do you know
I
what's
think they're
great about them for them
Mm-hmm.
is that they're not Monuments.
Yes.
Because Monuments is incredible. That first or second or whatever record that was.
The second
Amena
one.
fucking Osis or whatever. the fuck it is.
Amenuosis or
I
whatever,
think-
yeah.
That
Really good
record is
album.
incredible,
So good.
but it's just really fast Tesseract.
I think the
Every song is almost the same, which is good, but after a certain amount of time, I'm like, all right.
The
What else can
unparalleled
you do?
best thing about Tesseract is their knowledge of branding and advertising.
Oh, they're incredible
Oh, yeah.
at that.
That if there's anything you're going to learn from that band, it's
Yup.
how to do that.
And their presentation live.
That's
Yeah.
something I
Is
wanted to
unparalleled
talk
as
about
well.
with us. Is
like that's something people don't realize that's separate from the music when you're in that
Yeah.
industry is they learned how to focus on the things that most people don't.
Yeah.
And now they're a worldwide name because of it.
Yep. Yeah.
That's something I think about with us from time to time, and we.
That's what makes them great. That's
Let's-
what makes them great.
All right, I'll get into this in a minute. I want to go way back
Okay.
to when we were talking about Metallica.
Mhm.
As much as I love Metallica for certain things, Megadeth is just better.
Correct.
Every
That's
single
not
thing about
debatable.
Megadeth has been better. Now, here's what you got to understand, and
it's a bummer
maybe you don't
because
even have a
people
frame of
try to
reference
argue
for
that
this.
it's
I don't
I
know.
don't think I've ever heard a Megadeth song.
Okay,
It's
So-
surprising, right?
so Megadeth, for a lot of people, was
my
really
God,
hard
they're
to get
so
into because Mustaine's vocals are a little different. But I'm a guy that
They're less
listens,
accessible.
that
than
listens to
than
Rush
Hetfield.
like religiously. Rush is one of my favorite bands.
I love Rush.
Also, the funny thing, if you look
Geddy
at
Lee vocals.
look at the arc of a band,
Mhm.
like technicality versus accessibility,
Rush is the ultimate
Rush
example.
and Metallica have a through line. So Metallica was like,
2112.
here's our start, which is start rooted in one style. So Metallica's like, we're rooted in hardcore punk, right? Bay Area thrash punk, and then they got more technical, and then they went a little more commercial, and then they went to a blues band, which is just more commercial.
whatever. Yep.
That's what
I
they
hear
did.
ya.
So they went up technicality, more commercial, and then they settled. Rush started as a blues band, so that was their hardcore punk, and then they got more technical, more into the
They did
sci-fi stuff,
2112,
and then they put
they
out their
did,
best record.
Hemispheres.
Their best record ever was Hemispheres.
Hemispheres
No
is
one will fight me on that.
incredible, man.
And then guess what? bam, moving pictures, right into the accessibility.
And
then they followed it up
for their best album.
And then they followed it up with Signals.
Yep.
And then they went to, I think, Grace Under Pressure after
Yep.
that. And then they just kept going. Same thing as Metallica. You go up,
all
technicality.
amazing albums.
Because think about that, 78 Hemispheres, like Via Strangiato, all of those songs, they tracked those on tape. One take, 2 takes.
Here's an important thing, too, though.
Impossible.
That we don't see a lot of bands do anymore. That used to happen back then is bands that reinvent themselves and then have an album that is legendary status as like a masterpiece album in different sounds of different eras of that band. Like 2112 Hemispheres are legendary, incredible albums from the deep like Prague era of Rush.
Even Farewell to the Kings, yeah.
Yep. But then Moving Pictures is this whole other thing, and it's still a masterpiece, legendary album by that band.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a career-defining album. Metallica has their Master of Puppets and Just for All, but they also have the Black Album.
So here's what I'm going to say. Megadeth was neck and neck with Metallica.
Always.
They were just 2 years behind because Mustaine, everybody I'm sure who listens to metal, they know Mustaine was part of it for Kill 'Em All.
Of course.
And he left. Their first record, Killing Is My Business, was 85,
I think, 86.
4? I think it was 84 because
Before
Kill 'Em
any
All
of
was
us were
83.
alive.
I believe it was 84 or 85.
I think it was 85.
And it
but
was
who cares?
passable punk-inspired thrash. Like they had
He
Mechanics,
was like,
which was
it's Metallica, but a little bit faster.
like but more interesting to me as a kid when I was growing up, I heard Four Horsemen from Kill 'Em All by Metallica. I was like, oh, this song's cool.
And then Mechanics.
And then I
is
heard
just the
Mechanics. I was
same
like, oh, this is
song.
what it was supposed to be.
And it's just a
Faster?
little bit
more
faster.
interesting. Oh, okay, cool. So then Metallica does Ride the Lightning, and you're like, that's fucking sick. And then Megadeth does. Guess what? Here's Peace Sells, which is fucking incredible.
So good.
I mean, they used that.
So they were like the one-uppers.
They were, but the funny thing is,
Kind of.
a lot of people will never give them the credit for that because
Which is
they
a
just view
bullshit.
Dave Mustaine as like the guy that's nipping at the heels. But I would say that Dave was better as a businessman, and he was better at getting people involved with his band that made more sense for the band at the time. Because unfortunately, Megadeth was just like a rotating cast of guitarists and drummers and whomever. And it was mostly Dave and Dave. Like
Here's
that was
the
whole
thing. Here's the thing.
But
They were, except for the 10 years of their prime.
Right. But here's the deal with Megadeth. So you've got Killing Is My Business, which was okay.
Yeah.
For me.
Solid
it was okay.
start.
Oh yeah, take it all off. Right in front of the camera.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Do it.
Pull your butt out.
Pull your butt out. And then they went to Peace Sells. And then honestly for me, 88, I believe it was 88, was
So far, so good. So what? It's
not
one
really
of
my
favorites
favorite.
by them. I
Not
love
my
it.
favorite.
Hidden Gem, man. I love that album.
it's a little raw, and maybe that's why.
In My Darkest
But then guess
Hours,
what?
one of their
Guess
most
what?
classics.
Which was written about Cliff.
Yeah.
Best record they ever did, Rust in Peace. You can't
I would
fight.
disagree, but
Okay. I mean, you're probably
but it's
right.
arguable.
You can't,
totally
You just
arguable.
can't fight that record is a classic. It's got Marty Friedman.
It's the best
It's got-
technical thrash album of all time,
Absolutely.
and the most important.
Even
period.
the tracks that people forget about, like Lucretia,
Yep.
just slam.
Dude, Five Magics, Take No Prisoners.
Every song
Poison Was the Cure.
on that record. And that's the thing, like, too. So I'm a bass player, so let's talk about bass players real quick. You've got Cliff Burton.
Yep.
You've got Steve Harris. You've got David Ellefson. Fuck Tom Araya. I mean, I love him, but he's not a good player. That's not what
That's
it's
not
about.
what he's about. That's not what he's about.
And
He was
these were-
just kinda doing
These
it
are the
'cause they
guys I
needed
grew up on. Those three and Geddy Lee. Like, that's what I listened to. That's what my bass teacher, when I was a kid,
Alfson was always my favorite of all of them.
my least favorite of all four. But I respect the shit out of that guy and everything he's ever done. It's just really interesting because, like, think about Poison Was the Cure. That was one of the first times I personally had ever heard a bass in that context play
Dawn
like
Patrol, dude.
chords and shit. He
Yeah,
plays like,
he plays chords and stuff.
and it's
yeah.
nothing insane.
He
it's
never
not like
played
4-part.
insane stuff. He played what was like pipe dream best possible bass part for that section. Simple,
Oh,
to
yeah.
the point, filled the space, filled the mix,
And that's
drove
another
the
example of attitude.
That's my
If
style
he didn't
of
pick the
bass.
way he picked with the setup he had, it wouldn't have sounded that way.
No,
It's all about
I
attitude.
love his sound.
I've never been a fan of the sound. I've been a fan of the playing, but that's just me. I have my own hang-ups, but
That's no. It's
but
just
my point
preference,
is,
man.
I've always liked Megadeth more because I'm not bothered by Dave's vocals. I just think that
Me neither.
their songwriting was like Metallica on steroids, and then they had players that were just higher level.
Please do, yeah. Will you get me some as well with some ice? Yep. It's on the brown shelf that's in the corner on the left when you first walk into the kitchen, like right next to you when you walk through past the island. Thanks, man.
It's just even when they started to kind of go more commercial, like they did their commercial album in '92, I think it was, right?
Dude,
Euthanasia.
Oh, it's so
no,
good.
no, sorry, excuse me. Countdown was
Countdown
92.
was
Euthanasia was
theirs.
94. Countdown was great, dude. One of my favorite
Countdown
songs.
is their best album.
Favorite riff on that record, "Ashes in Your Mouth."
Oh,
Which is like
Countdown
such
to
not a
Extinction
song
is
that
their
people
best
think
album
about.
over Rust in Peace, and the arguments for it are
You
there's
and I
just too many.
You and I can disagree on
That's
that.
okay, yeah.
But I
Most people lean Rust in Peace.
I
but-
recognize that's the Justice
but
album
again,
and the Black album of Megadeth, and no one can ever take that away
Yep.
from anybody in that band.
the
at the
reason
time.
why I always say Countdown is because of the things that matter to me most in music, which
it's
is
not
the
that
songwriting.
It's not that you
the
lean toward a pop
accessibility,
sensibility, but it's more of a accessible
the memories
album.
and stuff.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
and that album was like Rust in Peace with enough polish on it to make it just a little bit more like memorable. For
There's
me,
a lot
you
of
know?
songs on that album that fucking rip that people don't even remember, like "Skin of My Teeth" even.
Amazing. Oh, here's the most
High
important
Speed
thing.
Dirt.
Here's-
It's like Van Halen on steroids.
Here's the most important reason, without question, why Megadeth will always be better than Metallica, and it's not even close to an argument, is that Dave Mustaine found debatably the most important guitarist ever in rock and metal in Marty Friedman. And the 10 years that he had Marty Friedman, I mean, Marty Friedman is probably my favorite guitarist of all time. He's like the number one reason why I even picked up a guitar. He's the reason why he's just
That's
so
weird.
much, such a gigantic influence.
That's really
on me as a
weird to me
human
though,
being.
because you don't pick your guitar like this.
No, dude, it's nothing like that. His sound,
No, I know.
his solos, like, that is the X factor that sets them apart from every single band that has ever been in their genre. Is that you didn't have Marty Friedman though?
I think that's
and
one
they
thing.
did.
One thing I struggle to grasp when I listen to you talk about guitar players is that you appreciate guitar players. While you appreciate their technical ability, it's more about their musical brain
Yup.
and how they put it together. So
Yup.
for me, it's
Phrasing.
like it's kind of shallow, and I wish it wasn't. But I look at somebody and I see them do something very technical, and I go, wow, they're a really great guitar player. But you've kind of transcended that, and you're like, no, what makes a great guitar player is not being able to play the notes, but knowing what notes. And that's something that
Note
like
choice
I
and
wish I could
phrasing is
fucking
just-
like. And it's not something. Yeah, I guess it's learnable to an extent, but it's also something that's very innate, and not
I think
everybody
it's-
can grasp it
Sure,
that easily.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like
I
like
think it's
your
a
voice.
difference. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
your
It's like
voice,
being
yeah.
a singer. Exactly. That's exactly it.
I think phrasing and note choice and stuff like that in a solo are the number one and number two things that are what make a solo memorable. Are what make it great. You can have all the fast licks in the world, but dude, just that's one of the things I love. Like, so Rust in Peace, dude. The solo in Lucretia, the solo in Poison Was the Cure, the solo in Tornado of Souls that he did in one take as a warm up, and Dave Mustaine went, nope, that's it. We're not touching that. And he went, I was just warming up, and he went, nope, that's perfect, because like. So when I was a kid, I was already obsessed with Friedman, and I didn't even know it yet because I grew up listening to Megadeth, and I just so I grew up my whole life like with that innate thing you were talking about of just having it drilled into my head, the difference between like a guy like Kirk Hammett or even other great players, you know. and a guy like Friedman, where there was just so like the guy can shred. He's actually one of the most important like shredder guitarists of all time because of his work with Jason Becker in the late '80s and Cacophony. The most influential guitarist of all time, in my opinion. And people will say Eddie Van Halen or Malmsteen or whatever, right? I think Friedman secretly is.
Get out of here with
I
that.
think Friedman secretly is the most influential guitarist of all time. And I think the people that today people look at as their favorite guitarists will tell you Friedman, like Jeff Loomis, Per Nilsson. Both guys are going to go Marty Friedman. Ever. Marty Friedman. And it shows in their playing.
I think people get so wrapped around the axle trying to have the technical skills that they forget about the musical skills.
He had the technical skills as much as anybody ever. He actually did.
You just said it.
And he didn't focus on it. He transcended it.
Like Per Nilsson is like...
He's probably my number 2 favorite.
He's one of
ever.
the guys, dude.
Yeah, he's one of them.
He can shred his balls off, but the guy has so much...
Yep, but the
like
best parts of his
sensibility,
solos, the best part of his solos is the phrasing and the note choice. This is the chord progression, and this is how I'm going to build it. Sensibility is the best word for it. Yep.
I realized that this whole podcast,
and you can learn that to an extent, but here's how you learn it: is a lifetime growing up listening to the guys that have that sensibility.
Yeah,
and then you just will get a feel for it. And it's innate.
It's funny. So here's the thing. This whole podcast has just been us jerking off about music we love, which is
great.
Great.
Whatever.
So here's the thing. People that influence you and how you do it, right?
Yeah.
So like, what do you give me like 5 guys? So this isn't for us. This is for anybody who actually sits through this podcast. If they aren't familiar with these people or what they do, maybe they can find something that they really dig, like outside of our music. So like, just throw like five dudes out there.
Okay. Mike Portnoy. For obvious reasons. Simon Phillips. Drummer.
That was the Toto guy, right?
Yeah, but
among other things.
Among other things, yeah. Marty Friedman, obviously. Per Nilsson as well.
And that's he obviously Scar Symmetry.
Yep, and I would say, and we can get into reasons why if you want, but I'm just throwing names right now. Yeah. I'm gonna say Mike Portnoy, Simon Phillips. Those are my drum guys. Per Nilsson and Marty Friedman for guitar, and then I would say, God, for a 5th person, man, I don't know, maybe Petrucci.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, probably I would say John Petrucci. Yeah. I would say all 5 of those guys have something in common that I learned from them before I realized what I was learning from them. That is the most important thing all 5 of them taught me, and it's that innate stuff. It's the songwriting, it's the moment building, it's you're not just gonna play the fastest thing you can play because you're gonna play it. Like Portnoy, he's one of the greatest drummers of all time. He's probably the most winning modern drummer of the year award guy ever. Right? He's Hall of Fame, youngest modern drummer Hall of Fame inductee. Cool, but what he did for me, and the same thing that Simon Phillips does for me, the reason I love both of those guys is you go, okay, this drum part is creative and cool, and it sets the part, right? So like, I could just play a 2/4, but find a creative way of playing essentially a 2/4 that is unique and kind of colors it to be your thing, right? That's cool. They do that stuff, but then it's like a big factor is like drum fills, right? And I feel like drum fills are important, but you have to make sure you do like the right amount. You have to do them in the right spots. You have to know when the feel of the song, how it feels at the time and the movement of the song is right for a fill, right? And then the fills they play every single time are perfect. And not perfect in a technical way, not perfect like they played it right, perfect, like you hear it and you go, that's such a cool fucking drum fill. Not because it's fast, not because it's crazy, because it's just the right thing. It's that right, even if it's just simple, even if it's just some like 3/4 tom hits or whatever, and then they roll into the downbeat of the next part or whatever. Like those guys were the two like geniuses of that kind of taught me that innate skill of like developing parts so that it's the right part, not necessarily the craziest or the hardest to play, but it's like the most fitting, like pop creates a moment, right? And then that's the same thing for Friedman and Per Nilsson, but on guitar. Is they're technical. They're some of the best guitarists that have ever lived. They're innovative. They're influential, whatever. But they're so good at creating moments, and they're you know. And then Per Nilsson, on top of that, for the songwriting, because I like Friedman I'm sure he's a great songwriter. His solo career is incredible. His solo albums are incredible, like Dragon Kiss and Scenes and shit like that. But you know, in Megadeth, Dave's writing the fucking songs, and he's an incredible songwriter. Per Nilsson is writing Scar Symmetry, and Scar Symmetry is the blueprint on how to do modern, like progressive power metal. They're so good at that. You know what I mean? They're so good. Such a big influence on me as a songwriter. But Petrucci is the same thing in like all the same ways. You know, like incredible player. Legendary, like memorable solos and licks and stuff like that. His riffs are amazing. His songwriting is incredible. I'm sure the songwriting with Dream Theater is a team effort. I'd be surprised to find out if like Rudess and Myung and stuff weren't involved in the songwriting. Yeah. Of course, I'm sure it's a team effort, especially with how crazy their stuff is. But yeah, those are the guys. Like growing up, listening to their work while I was developing as a musician, it explains everything about me. It explains my sensibilities. It explains my songwriting. It explains my technique choices. Everything, dude. I feel like that's unavoidable. That's the same for everybody, you know? The bands you listened to when you were learning instruments and when you were first discovering your love for music and making music are always going to be directly connected to who you are as a songwriter and as a player and stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Without question. Those are my guys, though.
So, who are your guys, Brad?
So, obviously, we've already talked about Paul Wagner.
Yeah.
Incredible.
There's no reason he would not be my number one.
Cool.
His proficiency, and it's more about the repeatability and the technical fundamentals. When he plays live,
Such a sound player.
dude, it's never different than the album. And with the level of music that they play, God, that's like unheard of. It's so fucking difficult for anyone that's ever like played music live or tried to play technical music with a repeatability factor. What they do is not earthly. It's really crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Another
Admittedly went over my head for a long time because I just never gave it its credit. You never gave it a chance, you know.
Another one would be J.B. Brubaker from August Burns Red.
Mm-hmm.
I know that those guys kind of get shit on a little bit because they were like, they were
never
like
questioned them.
Yeah, they
I
were
always
like
thought they
the
were sick.
commercialized. They were like, you know, we're like As I Lay Dying, but we appeal more to the emo kids. So they were like in that kind of group where
I have such a different point of view on that.
really,
but
because
yeah.
I feel like when I was in high school, they didn't get a lot of credit. Like
when I was in high school, they always got bricked in with the hardcore bands.
But they
and
didn't
I went,
belong there.
No, they didn't. But that's why I loved them, because I went, what the fuck? These guys are sick musicians, though.
yeah,
so
but,
fuck that.
yeah. What they did is they took metal, like metalcore rhythm guitar playing.
Yep, metalcore.
And they pushed that as far as they could. They never wavered. They didn't try to do something they weren't. They just said, we're going to take this one thing we're good at, and we are going to make it the best that we can. And they still do that to this day.
Yeah, they're great, man.
So this is gonna be like a weird thing. But as far as songwriting and as far as imposing emotion on your songwriting, this is not even somebody that is really technically proficient. But do you guys ever listen to Tom Waits?
No, but I've heard the
little
name.
bit.
I'm familiar with him.
So Tom Waits is probably, man, he might be like the saddest person that's ever written
He's
music
a fucking
ever.
character, that guy.
But the music that he writes, it's impossible to listen to his music and not have like your heartstrings pulled, and to feel the emotion that
I love
he's
stuff like that.
evoking. It's unreal, and it's obviously it's folk music. It's nothing heavy. It's nothing metal.
Which really quickly, I forgot about a whole aspect of my influence that I will talk about later. But continue. We'll
it's
get
funny
back to
because
it.
Tom Waits really gets to you.
Major
but he does it sound
aspect,
like
the most important aspect of
But
my
you
sound.
feel the pain in that sound.
He's
yeah,
just
I do.
like, I had to kill my own.
Well, and also
kids.
he also, I guess there's one song that really made me feel that way. He's got this song called "A Drop of Poison," and the whole main line of the song is "I like my town with a little drop of poison," and what he's saying is he likes being able to go downtown where he lives, and there's nothing that's fake about it, and there's nothing that like people are trying to believe that is better than it is. Like things are gritty, things are dirty. Not everyone's happy. Not everyone has a luxurious life.
Yeah, not everybody's.
And he was able to, in that song, encapsulate that feeling that I felt in my late teens, early 20s, in a way that it's unparalleled.
Something Tom Petty is incredible at.
Yeah.
It's his whole career, man.
Yeah,
is
but
nailing reality.
yeah, Tom Waits is like Tom Petty, but if you were to like put Tom Petty in like a cell that was in a cave for like 10 years and not feed him.
Just burn him out wicked bad.
Yeah, like
Make him.
Yeah,
wicked
You don't give him
cynical.
food. You just give him like
Yeah.
unfiltered cigarettes.
it's just a way with words. If we're talking about guiding feelings with music,
Yeah.
you also guide feelings with the words. And he's got this one line.
That's mostly what I'm thinking of when I think of Tom
He's got
Petty
this
is
one
his
line
words.
where all he says is I'm alone. I've smoked all my friends down to the filter. And anyone that's like lived any sort of life where you're kind of at your wit's end like that, that shit resonates.
Yeah.
That is like music that is impactful.
And that's an
stays
important
with you.
factor in music too, is
Yeah.
like the lyrical content is something that is weird for me because I'm always so focused on the music, but lyrical content is almost the most important thing because that's like what you're literally telling people.
That is
your
like shit.
messages,
It's like shit
know?
you don't forget. You hear that and it hits you so hard because it's things everybody's felt. But there's some musicians or some lyricists that have a way of putting things into words that most people don't, where you just fucking feel it. And a lot of people can't do that. Like Isaac Brock from Modest Mouse. Yeah, okay, so he was a big drug addict. He, everyone's got their judgments, but
Whatever.
But his lyrics, like if you listen to a lot of Modest Mouse stuff, yeah, their music, okay, whatever, it's listenable, like it sounds good. But man, his analysis of the way life is and how it's not how everyone wants it to be, and it's difficult,
Yeah.
and it's confusing, and it hurts, and it's never easy. Like there's easy moments, but it's always buried by hard times.
That's one thing to mention about Metallica and Megadeth too, is that back in their primes, back in the day, their lyrical content was incredible. They weren't singing about dragons and dungeons and I'm gonna kill this guy. Like they were singing about real shit.
Yeah, because there's deep meaning in everyday life, and a lot of people choose to ignore it. So when there's a lyricist that can put that on the fucking stage and say you're not the only one that deals with this,
It's something I
It's
love
a
about
real
Pat's
thing.
lyrics, dude.
yeah, he does that too.
Pat, our singer, his lyrics are incredible. And it's funny because I'm the worst lyric guy ever. I don't focus on lyrics. I'm terrible at writing lyrics. I'm all about music and sound. So when Pat writes lyrics, I'm always just like, "K, cool, whatever, man, as long as they're good."
And
And
then
then I go back and I read them, and I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding
And then he
me?"
explains it to me, and I'm like crying. I'm
Yeah,
like, that's so,
dude, he's so
so
good
right.
at that. And that's just
Yeah, he's like an enigma, dude. We
what
got to
the
get him
fuck?
on.
You know
one
what
of these
pisses me
podcasts.
off is he's
He'll
like,
do it.
oh, I don't ever
I know.
want to do a podcast. He's like, I don't want to do it.
He's done them. He did them.
He doesn't want to
forever.
do these.
Yeah, well,
He doesn't
Don't.
have to. He'll do them as a guest eventually, like if we're on the road and we do.
He's
one
a
on the bus
guest
or
on our
band or
own
something.
podcast for our
Yeah,
band.
that's okay, man. That's okay. It's probably going to be
Special
mostly
guest,
the
the
three
guy
of
in
us,
the band.
because we're the most available to do it, and we're the most like we want to do it. Everything this band
fine, it's
does is not necessarily going to involve everybody.
So the last influence that I have to
Yeah,
add to
continue,
this is and this, it's funny because if you list all these out, it makes sense as to nobody that's listening to this would realize this, but we all
We will.
we all demo ideas, and
we will.
and my ideas tend to be a little chaotic and maybe not thought through as much as they could be. Like I just get something out and I say I like this, and I kind of put
They're
pieces
raw,
together.
which
They're
is
very
cool,
raw, yeah.
which is cool.
So there's this band called Hot Heat. I don't know if you guys know.
I'm familiar
who
with
that
the
is.
name, but I'm not very familiar with the music.
Right. So what
I've heard 'em, though.
what this band did is they had a single on K-Rock when I was in high school. It was called Bandages, and what this band is good at is they take very uncommon or strange melodic ideas and time signatures, and they put them together in a way to where when you listen to a song, you don't realize that it's an odd time signature, because I think it's mostly due to the singer. I haven't done a lot of research, but I have to believe that he's mostly the brains behind the operation. He plays the keyboard and he sings, and that's how most of their music is driven. But what they do is they take all these uncommon ideas and they transform it. I mean, they had a single on K-Rock. They were like a big deal band when I was in high school, and they put albums out since then that were not mainstream and they were not famous, but. They were able to take all these weird ideas and put them together in a way that was palatable for the common listener, and it's very high level musical stuff that if you were to just hear one of the instruments, anyone that's not a musician would be going, that I don't, it'd go over their head, but they were able to combine it in a way that makes sense to the common listener, and it's interesting to me because we play heavier music. Metal, whatever you want to call it, but there's all these other bands like I mentioned Tom Waits, I mentioned Hot Heats, but there's all these other musical influences that there's concepts that we can take and implement.
It's huge, and that's something I was going to bring up too.
Yeah, because you can't just listen. You can't put yourself in a silo and just listen to the one genre you're going to play.
There is actually specific stuff that is the biggest influence on me that I didn't even mention.
Yeah.
But continue.
But yeah, just anyone that's listening, please listen to Hot Heat. They've got a lot of great albums. They have I think 7 mainstream albums that are out, and
Christ.
Nobody knows who they are. But
I've never even heard of them.
Dude,
I've heard of the name. I've never.
I think I
listened to
played
the
an
music.
album for you, and you were like, you recognized how good they were. You're like, it's not my style, but they're fucking good. Is basically what you said.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it just reminds me that you're able to take things that are not palatable at first and kind of present it in a way that is, and that's the trick of progressive music, right? It's like trying to take stuff that doesn't sound good and make it sound good, and
It's
move,
one
and
of the
move
tricks.
it, move it to
Yeah.
a place that
You're trying
is
to make
meaningful.
this technical music that is thought out and might be a challenge to digest, and you're trying to make it digestible.
Yeah, and those guys are like literally the best example.
Yeah.
They go from it's really crazy. They go from swing to bluegrass. They do all this shit, but their songs are thematic. Like they don't move in and out within one song. They have a song that's like, this is the style of this song. We're gonna do it very well. And then they do this again, and they do this again. But you kind of find this common thread among all their music where you see the raw talent with what they're doing. That's really it for me. I'm not a guy that studies a lot of guitar players. I just kind of always.
It's probably for the best.
I've just had one in my hands and I just wrote what I could. That's probably why I suck.
I didn't say it.
Wow, you didn't disagree though, you fucking asshole.
I play bass.
Scuzzy.
Don't worry about it.
Scuzzy.
Yeah, I already don't.
So to backtrack a minute, so I was talking about like you asked me 5 players that influenced me, right? Those are guys that influenced me, okay? They're not necessarily my favorites ever. Like, probably my favorite progressive band is Symphony X. And I think they're a big influence on me, right? But I found them way later in my musical journey. So I had already figured out who I was as a songwriter and what I do and stuff like that way before I found that band. I just found that band and I love that band.
They
you know
fit
what I mean?
that mold. You were like,
Yeah, they fit a mold I was looking for that I hadn't found yet, But I would say, bar none, the most important influence on me as a songwriter and as
Spire.
yeah, right. Okay, yeah, it was actually Pat's old band. No, the most important influence by far is movie and video game soundtrack writers. No question, because I grew up obsessed with movies and obsessed with video games. My whole childhood, playing like Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo and stuff like that, the songs you would hear in the games would influence me way more than any music I was hearing at the time.
And because that's like a stripped down version of what you're talking about. Because
Yes.
the whole point of a movie or a game score is to develop that moment. But you don't have as many resources. You don't have the full attention of the listener.
It's stripped down big time. You
You have to know how
are-
to do it subtly and
So,
subconsciously.
Think of film scores. Think of legendary film scores. You know what I mean? Like John Williams with Star Wars and stuff like that, right? The only thing he had no choice but to write a memorable theme, and that's it. He had to come up with a memorable theme because that's what they went, hey, we need you to write a theme of music. And you can dive into the details of it as much as you want after, but you better come up with a theme, a basic melodic movement that's going to be drilled in people's minds forever.
And something I need to get better at, and something that you do, which is what he did with that, is he worked with like 6 notes or like 6 chords. It was not complex. It was just so memorable. Like that's the trouble I run into is I think I need a lot of notes to make things memorable.
But that's your background. That's what you were talking about, dude. Like August Bird's Rad and stuff like that. Like you're talking about Between the Buried and Me. Like these are very technical, progressive, modern bands, and they're great. But go for the fundamentals. Find the most memorable thing you can do with the least. It doesn't mean you can't jazz it up after.
Strip it back first.
Yeah, strip it back.
I'll say,
A lot of times you'll find that when you strip it back and you find the basic version, it's still the best version.
I'll say a huge deal as far as like video game music goes. Almost everything from the Super Nintendo era.
Oh my God! Yeah,
dude.
that's the shit. That's the shit.
And it's
Super
not
Nintendo / Sega Genesis. Yeah,
it's like an attack on 2 fronts. It's that the music is really well composed and it's memorable, but also the thing you have to understand is like a Super Nintendo cartridge has like
no space.
1/100th of the memory of a $5 flash drive you buy at a fucking
It was like
drugstore.
32 megabit or something.
It's like
Something.
nothing.
Max size, and they have to fit a full
Literally-
game on there and audio.
Nothing.
And the games
And-
were perfect. They never came out with a day one patch. They came out playable.
Nintendo
So-
is the greatest
so what I'm gonna-
example of that ever in history, where
So,
they
like,
only put out masterpieces.
Donkey Kong
on all
Country.
phones. Oh my God!
The
man,
music from that game.
How'd they do it? Have you ever watched the thing on how they made the music?
Oh yeah, and it's done with so little,
Yeah, they have nothing.
and it's so effective. Think about like the fucking water level. You can hear that in your head right now.
Oh yeah,
you know what that is.
I was
Think-
hearing
Everyone
it.
hates the
I was
water level.
hearing it
Think
in
about
Donkey Kong Country. Yeah, kind of.
In any game ever, water
think
levels
about
always suck.
the bramble levels where you
Mostly
fly.
in Ocarina
with that
of Time
really-
for N64.
that
It's
really,
the worst
like-
of all time. The Water Temple.
That really like
Tomb
laid
Raider,
back-
Mario, all water levels suck. I don't mean to keep interrupting you. You just got me caught.
That,
on
those
thing.
those bramble levels in like Donkey Kong Country 2 with that like laid back music, like
Yep.
that music.
Also, real quick
Because
side
it's
note.
ingrained in your brain because it's so memorable, even though it's very simple. It's just made with a few garbage like fucking machine beeps and boops.
Worth noting, side note, fuck mine carts. Fuck mine carts. Fuck you, Nintendo. Fuck you, Rare. Fuck mine carts. That's bullshit.
Mostly it's because
you're making those jumps and it's just telling you you're not.
it's sluggish. It
It's
feels
bullshit.
terrible.
No, it doesn't, though. That's the problem. The game is perfect, but you are making those jumps in the minecart levels, and it just tells you you're not.
I think the
It
problem
makes
is
you
because
crash.
I was playing.
It's bullshit.
I was playing it on an emulator, and I just think there's like a delay. I don't know.
There
Anyway.
probably was.
Anyway.
No, the point is the music.
Don't play the victim.
There-
You just suck.
the
dude.
amount
That's-
of
that's
games,
also
the
true.
amount of game soundtracks, and like not even a soundtrack, but it's just like Streets of Rage 2 for Sega Genesis. Yuzo Koshiro, dude. The soundtrack for that game, every single stage had incredible music. And guess what all that music is? It's fucking house music. It's nothing I listen to. It's more influential on me as a songwriter than any metal band I've ever listened
I
to.
mean,
it creates the atmosphere.
There's
Yep.
stuff that's stuck in your head from being a kid
That's what it is.
when you're the age you are.
Because it was the most impactful
Like,
on me.
think
I
about
was
when you
developing.
walk across the kid with the shorts in Pokemon. The second that you walk past him and the screen
The music in
changes,
that game.
you hear that Like, you know what the fuck that is. Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
There's that. There's the Final Fantasy music.
I think that's the most notable thing about movie scores and video game scores is it's not telling you a story necessarily, but it's creating an atmosphere and creating
the story's being told in another way.
Yeah.
And they're just trying to enhance that story. That's it. They're adding to it.
And when you guys say it was technically proficient when it was written, is not a lie. I used to know this great bass player. His name is Mike Lenahan from Oswego. Nobody knows who the fuck he is because he was just like a quiet guy who didn't talk to a lot of people.
I know Sean Lenahan.
But he was in a couple of bands. He used to play around town all the time. And he ended up being in one of my bands. It was like this like funk kind of rock band. We just kind of played around town. But what he would do for practice is he would learn by ear sonic bass lines, not the melodies. He would listen and learn the 8-bit bass lines, and he would do that for Mario, and that was his practice. And he was like one of the fucking best bass players I've ever talked to. We covered the Sonic theme song on one of our demo albums just because like he was so into it and it sounded so good. So we figured out the rest on all the other instruments.
Mm-hmm.
But that music was not easy, and it was very well thought out and very well written.
It's not easy because it's all programmed. That's the thing. Like, you can do it if you're good. Like, I've looked at a few of those like bass lines from like those Sonic tunes. Like, they're not written to be played for real on a bass guitar. They're synthesizer music. So it's like it's fucking nuts. Or like Undertale.
People are amazing.
If you play Undertale, some of the music in that is so goddamn memorable. I don't know if you guys did you play Undertale, Dave?
No, I've never played it. I hear it's incredible.
Dude, so
I never even heard of it.
It's so good. You just have to play. Anyway,
what platform is it on?
It's like you can get it on Steam. It's on PC, but it's on like everything. It's like it looks like a Super Nintendo game, but it's
there's been like a reemergence
it's
of
a
the
modern
old school
game.
games.
Yeah,
like,
retro gaming.
The
is
story
huge.
of it is
what was that one?
just-
Celeste that came out like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, a big one for me was Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight.
Shovel
never
Knight.
played
Yeah.
that.
So fucking
Or Enter the Gungeon. Dude,
Yep.
have you guys played that shit?
I've heard of it,
but I've heard
I've
good
heard of
things.
it.
It's hard as fuck, and it's wicked fun.
So, influences for me, I guess.
Oh, we don't want to hear those.
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
I mean, one of the big ones, I guess, is Iron Maiden. Like, and it's not just Steve Harris.
Amazing.
It's just like Iron Maiden as a whole.
Influential for a very important thing that we haven't mentioned yet: vocals.
I mean, that's
Because Bruce Dickinson is wicked hard,
Well,
the most important metal vocalist of all time.
Even Paul Di'Anno had some good licks on. Like,
Get the
Killers
fuck
and
out
shit.
of my
I'm not saying he's
face.
anywhere near as good as Bruce
What
Dickinson.
the fuck?
Oh, you mean
Number of the Beast.
you mean you
bro.
don't love Blaze Bayley?
No, I love Number of the Beast.
What I'm saying is, not even just
yeah,
a
right. Somewhere in Time is the shit. Power Slave. That's the shit.
Seventh Son.
Seventh Son, man. That is such a good
That's
album.
my record.
Fear of the
Surprisingly.
Dark is a really good one too, but it's like
I
it
didn't-
was more recent, so people didn't give it a chance. That's like one of their best songs, though. Fear of the Dark.
Anyway, I mean, that's shit I grew up on, and it's not just about Steve Harris or
Maiden.
like what he did. It's about the fact that
Also grew up on Maiden. Love
if you
them.
look at it, the crazy thing is, Steve Harris was like the guy that ran the band, and when
Pretty
you're
much, yeah.
when you do music, whether you do it for a living or it doesn't really pay, but you want to do whatever the situation. is,
whatever, yeah.
when you do music with a group of people, you're trying to herd cats. Like, you've got a bunch of human beings with their own thoughts and their own brains, and they have different priorities, and they
Their
think
own
this, they
ideas
think
that
that.
they want to interject into the sound and stuff like that.
Steve Harris wrote a lot of tunes.
Mm-hmm.
He had a very influential style of playing for bass players, but the
Big
big deal with him is he tried to keep those guys dry. He was like, we're not going to drink. We're going to go play tunes. We're going to go do covers, and then we're going to do our
Trying
own
to
band.
control the mass.
He was able to try to put an infrastructure in place that made that band so that they were able to be that new wave of British heavy metal. Like,
And
they,
actually be successful.
they weren't hungover. They went to the gig and they played.
So what you're saying
they're
is,
so good live.
he's an example of what to do when you're actually a professional in the industry.
Correct.
Exactly. Not only was he an
Correct.
influential player with a unique sound and tone and blah blah
It's
blah,
influential
He
on
said,
how to be
look,
successful.
this is a business, and we need to
Yes.
treat it.
he
as
understood the business.
always was
of it,
huge in
even
that.
when they were a cover band or when he played in cover bands in the late
Yep.
70s,
That.
early
I feel like
80s.
that's lost on so many musicians.
God,
and
yeah.
that's due to the 60s and 70s, where like the rock star attitude was kind of publicized, and all of the musicians that were famous at that time were just drunk and on coke and on acid
You
all
have
the
the
time.
Doors.
That shit don't
When
fly anymore.
Morrison goes on stage, he's belligerent. He can't even say a word of English,
I mean,
let alone
I
fucking
don't- I-
sing his parts. And then he gets carried off stage by cops.
And it was glorified.
It was glorified.
I don't
It
know
was
if we touched on
championed.
this last time or not, but the fact that like and I mean again, everything we say, take it with a grain of salt. But in the position we're in, there's so many things about being in a band that have literally nothing to do with music. It just
My God, yes.
That's what people don't get. Like I tell people that playing our instruments is probably 10% or less of what it takes
Yep.
to do that.
Oh
and
my
that's
God,
something
yeah.
that's something
We
I
never
wanna-
even think of it, man.
I have a whole list of podcast
Well, that-
topics, which we'll never get to, but something I wanted to touch on, which maybe now's the time, is like branding a band and like maintaining an image and not like, oh, I'm Johnny Depp, so I'm mysterious and I drink wine and I beat my wife
and
or
I
whatever.
waste
It's like-
money, bad waste money.
it's
Well,
Buy
we
like,
got
a
millions of it.
town.
Doesn't really fucking matter.
Tell his accountant that.
Did you say buy a town?
He bought a town because he liked he was like, I like this house in this town, but I like this house too. And he just goes to his accountant. He's like, I want to buy all this. I'm going to buy this town. And his accountant's going, you got to stop. You got to stop. We can't do this, man. You're not making enough money, and you're spending like $150,000 or $200,000 a month on just wine.
And he
You've
said-
got to stop.
He said, "What do you mean not making enough money? I'm Jack Sparrow."
Yeah, and he was just like, the money's not coming in. That's not a thing.
you know,
that's
they had
not
to-
real. The
you know
money's
they had
not
to
there.
like feed his lines to him through like in-ears, like
Oh, yeah.
on set because
He's
he
a
just didn't give a
rat.
shit. Like
He's
he
a
didn't read
rat.
the
I also
script.
heard this might be bullshit, but I also heard that he doesn't ever watch his own movies.
Nope.
Like he's not self-reflective.
Do you think he's ever
Doesn't
watched?
give a fuck, man.
Think
He's
he's
just
ever watched
floating.
Nightmare on Elm Street #1?
What the fuck? If you asked him if
Was
he was
he
in
in
that
that?
movie, he'd probably be
He
like,
was in
what
that.
movie? He was one of the main characters in the
You-
first Nightmare on Elm
You guys
Street.
ever hear about how much of an asshole Kevin James is?
I've heard
Really?
he's an ass. It's a bummer. I
so,
love
so
Kevin
dude,
James,
so
but
King of
yeah.
Queens.
He's too
he
fat
got,
to be mean.
Yeah, he got famous on like an NBC sitcom or I don't know what station.
King
it
of
was on, but
Queens.
Yeah, it was King
Well,
of Queens.
Yeah,
he
no,
was a
fucking
stand-up comedian who had some success prior, and then back in the '90s, late '90s, early 2000s, like what you did in stand-up was your end goal, career goal was get a sitcom.
Yeah.
And he got King of Queens, and bang,
It
you're
went to
made.
his head immediately.
Yeah.
So what I heard about Kevin James is that when he goes to restaurants, he's got his assistant with him. Like apparently he's just got this sidekick that always does all of his shit. He will go to a restaurant and not even look the waiter or waitress in the eye. He will look at the menu and he will turn to his assistant and say, "This is what I want off the menu." And then his assistant will then tell the waiter or waitress what he wants off the menu because he thinks he is so
The fuck?
above the common person that is just trying to do their fucking
On with
job.
that shit. Get out of here.
No,
Here's
that's
the
a
thing.
real
Get the
thing.
fuck out
Here's
of
the
here.
thing.
If that's even like 1% true, that's ridiculous.
It's tough, man.
Let's look it up.
because it's tough because look it up doesn't mean that is necessarily true.
Depends on how many sources you find.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah. People can say whatever they want. And here's something that's tough with fame. And now none of us are famous, but a lot of famous people say this, especially post internet and social media. If you have one bad day, that is what you're known for forever, is however you acted during that bad day.
Yeah, but if your one bad day is Paul Blart Mall Cop, you're
but-
branded forever.
No, dude, it's just like Christian Bale gets a lot of shit because he
Oh,
had that
dude.
freak out on the
Which
Terminator
is funny
Salvation
because
set.
if you
But I would have physically attacked the guy.
If you
There's
asked-
so much money at stake.
What
There's
I-
so much time at stake.
what I
And
heard
like-
from like industry people or people that I follow, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean I'm not an expert, but what I've come to sort of understand is that he was kind of justified.
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. Is
It
like
doesn't get
there's
skewed
so
that
much.
way.
The amount of money that is dropped a minute to make a Hollywood level AAA film, right, is so absurd that it almost pisses you off. You're like, it doesn't cost that, and if it does, it's people being scum so it shouldn't cost that, right? But you're talking like $1 million a fucking hour it costs to make a fucking Hollywood movie and shit. Like, it's so stupid, you know? So he's aware, like, we've got to get these takes, and they've got to be perfect 10 takes ago, you know? Because the amount of money that's getting siphoned the more time goes on making a movie. And this fucking guy who's on set working as like a grip or some shit is walking in front of the fucking lighting and shit and fucking the shot up. And Christian Bale loses his mind because he's going, you've got to be kidding me. Like, why are you even involved in this production if that's your move, you know?
I don't care how much pressure you're under. If you can't be a decent person to the fucking dude that's
fuck
just
that,
like,
man.
that's bullshit.
So that would be like if we were recording the album and I'm the guy engineering and somebody's wasting 8 hours of my day on takes that are zero usable, then you expect me to have a smile on my face.
I would be amazed if any of them wasted 8 hours. I guarantee they get about 10 seconds of being in the way, and they get told to get the fuck out of the way.
The amount of time it takes just to set up one shot is the problem. You're talking about, like, let's say there was pyro involved, right? Let's say it's a shot with pyro. You're talking about like a 4-hour setup time for 30 seconds of shooting, and then a guy walks in front of the fucking shot, and now they just wasted 5 hours.
Dude, I'm talking about a waitress at a restaurant, not a guy in the set.
No. I'm saying, I'm just saying, like,
where did we go here?
With the Christian Bale thing, his freak out made people think he was a prick for the rest of his career.
But not necessarily.
But in reality, he had been shooting for 14 hours, and they kept trying to get this right.
I didn't realize it. So there's also, have you ever seen the Shia LaBeouf clip about when he goes off the handle about how he's an artist and nobody understands the pressure he's under?
No,
so there's a clip of him. So
I've seen
there's a couple points to that. So one of the points is, you got to be careful who the fuck might be recording what you're doing, because it could be career ending.
Oh yeah.
Clearly it wasn't for him, luckily. But there was a video, you can find it on YouTube, where somebody laughs at, so somebody busts not Shia LaBeouf, who is it? It's the fucking kid who played on Arrested Development.
Michael Cera.
Yep.
I'm aware.
Okay. So somebody says something about Michael Cera, and somebody else laughs. And the kid that's like bringing the coffee into the set to be like, here's your coffee, Michael Cera. Dude, he goes off and starts screaming about how he's an actor, and if anyone wants to fucking laugh at him, they don't understand what he goes through, and yada, yada, yada. It's like a 7-minute video.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that.
That kind of thing is like, yeah, okay, I get it.
Seems like a little much. Yeah.
It is, yeah. I get you're under a lot of pressure, but fuck, you got a public persona to upkeep, man.
Yeah, yep.
And I know that
the toughest part.
None of us can have a realistic lens on what it's like to actually be in that situation, so we're just speculating. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like, just don't be a fucking dick.
But it's important, like, that's worth noting too. Like, we're speculating based on what we're seeing, right? And that is what is the important factor, is that the outside view doesn't have the inside info. They don't know what the fuck happened. They don't know the details. They don't know the pressure. They don't know whatever. But you have to be careful of that if you're in the fucking public eye. That's like a
video tells a story, though.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting at. It's like, that's like if you are somebody that is like cherished by kids, right? That's like John Cena, right? John Cena is like one of the most over wrestling guys, right?
He's also an angel.
And he's never done a heel turn. Like, he's never been a bad guy, right? But his reason is because he is the hero to like every single child that watches wrestling right now. And maybe not right now, because he's kind of on the twilight of his career, which is cool. He has one of the greatest runs of all time, if you're a wrestling fan. That's a whole different can of worms.
Nobody is, ever.
But yeah, I am. But anywho, Cena, for many years, was the champion of like children, you know? And you have to be so careful with that. If you know that you are the hero of millions of like 6-year-old boys, you better not get found out saying fucked up shit that's gonna fuck with these kids. Can't do it.
Isn't he like the #1 contributor for Make-A-Wish Foundation?
ever, regardless of company, regardless of anything. He's the number one Make-A-Wish, like wish granter that's ever lived.
That's awesome.
He's an angel. He is.
Incredible human being.
More so than
way
Chris
beyond
Angel.
anything that has to do with wrestling. He's just incredible. Yeah. But the point I'm making is, and that this is what's important, and this is like, I think kind of what you're trying to say with your point is like, very cool. You had a bad day. You don't get to, because you want to have the rewards of fame and success, the money, the like comfort, all that stuff. Well, guess what comes with it?
You're under a microscope every fucking day.
The responsibility. Yep. You don't get to be out there being a prick, because now it's over. You don't deserve, like, if you're going to be an influencer and you're going to be somebody who people look up to, you have to be aware of that responsibility, and you better fucking take it seriously.
And we live a life where we're able to commit actions that maybe sometimes would have some negative consequences, like if people knew about it, but we're allowed the time and the freedom to look back on it and learn from it. When that shit's all on camera, you don't get that freedom.
No, you don't, even if you're not famous.
So
Yeah.
I feel like kind of tying into this, and we'll get back to my people later. It's fine.
Whatever, yeah, we're just riffing.
We're dudes with our own lens of experience, or whatever you want to call it, right? Like, we've done X in the music industry, and we feel a certain way about whatever.
Yep.
We're not experts. We're not on a label. We're not like paid good money to do whatever. But we have our own insights, I guess, on things we've seen.
Yeah.
And what I think is crazy is when you see other people in the music industry or other people in bands or at whatever level, and you see them just say or do like super inflammatory shit. Like, that's really what it is.
So you're just talking about Abe Mustaine, though?
No.
Okay.
I'm talking about somebody. I'm talking about somebody else, but I'm not going to name names because that's fucked up.
Okay.
When you see people that aren't
sounds like
people that aren't grateful for what they've done,
oh, that's not Dave Mustaine.
and won't acknowledge that they've gotten to a certain point, because they do something that to other people doesn't even fucking matter. So like, if we were to sign a record deal tomorrow with whoever and put a record out and sell like 200 copies,
whatever,
Jesus Christ, like 1,000 copies, and then like another 1,000 copies the next weekend. Like, if we sold like 3,000 copies of our record through a record label, to that label, that's nothing. They gave us an advance, whatever. We're in debt. It's terrible. That's 2,000 copies of a record that we put out that somebody bought. So like, there's money behind it. There's an incentive for you to sell. There's a branding. There's an image, which I think is a really interesting facet to what we do. But you better believe that we should be grateful that 2,000 of those fucking copies of that record sold.
Yeah,
even if they printed 100,000.
In the grand scheme of things,
anybody who
2,000 is
cares.
zero. And still,
but what I'm saying
you
is,
have to appreciate it.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody that cares about what you're doing is so incredible because they don't have to. Nobody's obligated to give a shit about what you're doing.
It's easy
Nobody
to forget
owes
that
anybody
when you're just looking at numbers. It's easy to forget that.
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot to unpack there. Where celebrities that there's a lot of reasons they can crack like that. There's either the pressure where they get this fame that they're not ready for, so they don't know how to react, and they get all this money that they don't know what to do with.
That's huge.
Right, so look at like Lindsay Lohan or Britney Spears or fucking
music,
Aaron Carter.
In music, the greatest example I think of is Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses, because he's been so vocal about it.
And that's also like the big,
I have a lot of
that's also
respect
the
for
biggest
that guy,
because
but
he was probably bigger than all the ones I just listed.
He's a guy who was not necessarily a shit guy or anything like that. You know, he had his troubles. He, I'm sure like the rest of them, he probably drank or did drugs or whatever and had a rough upbringing, whatever. That's not the point I'm focusing on.
That's like par for the course of those guys.
He's been vocal about the fact that what happened to him that was so negative is Guns N' Roses went from we don't exist, no one's heard of us, to biggest rock band on planet Earth and he went from no one knows who he is to if he's on the street, he's mobbed.
Yeah.
And he just was like, what the fuck? And he wasn't prepared to deal with any of that. And it was a long ass nightmarish road for his ass. And everybody knows about it. If you know anything about Guns N' Roses, you fucking know how hard of a time that fucking guy had with that shit.
Did you guys watch The Dirt on Netflix?
I didn't.
I didn't. I read the book
I want
a long time ago.
I just haven't gotten to it.
Dude, Motley Crue went through a very similar situation.
Yeah, where you're just famous overnight and you can never walk down the street again. You just have your freedom taken away from you.
They're just kids when that happens.
Yeah, you weren't ready.
Dude, they were like literally 20.
Yeah.
So that, to me, that's one of the reasons people crack. Another reason is sometimes people get negative light because their image is built on like shock value, and then they push
Steve-O.
they push it too far.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like another reason that a career can take a downslope is they think that the only thing they can do to impress people, which
well, Steve-O's doing great, but
but
I feel like he's an exception.
We're lucky now in the age that we live in to understand that if you are a public personality and you can present your ideas in a forum like a podcast or like get on news articles or whatever, people are likely to listen. But before that was a thing, people that were shock value artists thought that their only way to reach their audience was to be the most shocking thing
to be
they
a
could,
shock value,
and they would just take it too far.
Yeah.
So that's like another reason that people
that's like literally Jackass. That's only Jackass.
Oh, exactly.
Exists.
Well,
there's a lot of good examples,
and
but
it's a huge influence on us as people.
Yeah, we talk
Think about it that way.
We talk about Steve-O, good story. You know,
Bam
we can talk about Bam.
Bad story.
We can talk about Ryan Dunn.
Ryan Dunn, yeah.
It's not all fucking rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah, but your point's correct. Yeah, people crack, and for different reasons, and those are major reasons, and it's hard. Something that I've tried to do, just as a human, as I've gotten older, and I've tried, like I feel like part of the human journey, if you will, is to always be working on yourself and how you can be a better person, how you can be more successful in what you want to do with your life, whatever. Trying to be a better person, trying to make the most of whatever the fuck this is we're doing by existing. You know what I mean? Part of that, something I try to do is to be a lot more understanding and a lot more like I try to be a lot less quick to judge, right? So
not me.
So that doesn't mean I don't judge, but
you're just a little less quick.
I try to be careful.
Slower now.
Yeah, I try to be careful because it's what you're talking about. It's like anytime you see anything, like there's a fucking reason. Now, a lot of times that reason might be because somebody's a fucking sociopath. So fuck them. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's what you're talking about. It's like, hey, this guy is perceived to be a prick. It's like, well, what's going on? Because I don't know all the details. But if I find out the details and he's just a fucking prick, then fuck that guy.
But if that's what made him famous, he's got to try to live up to that.
Yeah.
So it's like, where do they draw that line?
Yeah.
I kind of relate it. This might seem like a weird analogy, but I relate it to having a kid.
Okay.
It's something. So if you're aspiring to be a celebrity, it's something that you want to do and you're building yourself up in your mind to do it. But when it happens, depending on the scope of it, you may or may not be ready.
Yeah.
It's the same fucking thing with having a kid.
That's perfect. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think
you want kids, you envision how having kids is going to go, then you have one and you go, oh.
And there's parallels that can be drawn after like say you have a kid. There's so many parents that aren't fucking ready for it and they book. Like you hear about that all the fucking time. The same thing with celebrities. They finally get to that status, and they don't know how to handle it. So the natural human instinct is fight or flight, so they choose flight, and they're gone. Mm-hmm. It's like the same fucking thing. Like you can get ready and ready and ready, but there's some things you just can't really be prepared for. And one of those things is instantly waking up one morning and realizing that you're on a world stage. And everybody's looking at you,
and that doesn't go away ever again. And if it does, it's usually not a good thing.
Can you just imagine that pressure?
Things that I've heard, like
I can't.
That's what happened to Kurt Cobain, right? At least like things you've heard or speculated, right? Like he didn't want to be a famous dude, and then Nirvana was like the most famous band ever in the early '90s, and that's
probably almost ever. They're like top 10 most talked about bands in the history
that have ever lived. And for so many
no matter
reasons,
how you feel about it, that's the truth, right? So like he couldn't cope with it, and then whatever else happened after that happened. Suicide, killed by Courtney, whatever the fuck the
killed
deal.
by Courtney
Whatever.
is pretty much guaranteed. But anyhow,
I agree. Whatever. My point is
like
that's
Epstein
that's the
killed
thing,
himself.
No question.
dude.
There's
all
just
those
no
those
question.
memes about Epstein
I love
are
it.
so good.
Did you see the?
They
Did
are
I send
really
you the
funny.
one with Rogan? There's one that somebody made. It's the Photoshop Steve on Instagram. He's the best Photoshop dude in the world.
Okay.
But Photoshop Steve made one that is like it's like a cut of Rogan sitting at his table. It looks like just like the YouTube shot you'd see of a Rogan podcast,
Right.
where it says like Joe Rogan Experience episode number whatever, right? And it says on episode whatever, Epstein is here to talk about like the controversy surrounding his death. And it's like Rogan sitting there with Epstein sitting across from him at the table. That's so good, dude.
Okay.
You know that motherfucker was killed. Come on.
Oh,
it's not even like
murdered
a
in
question.
cold blood,
Dude,
Yeah.
even
What
the
I,
medical.
what, I
now
don't
the-
get, what I don't get is why people fucking care.
Yeah, who cares? And then the,
You know why
the
they care?
examiner came out and was like, he was killed.
You know why they care is because, and like maybe this is just my opinion.
It's the implications of what it means.
The
it's
fact,
what it means.
The
if he was
fact
killed.
that the fact that everybody, especially in the Reddit community, has been fucking screaming from the rooftops. Look how corrupt this is. Look how fucked up this is. He might have been fucked up because he facilitated this, but look what they did to him to get it so that, like,
The
just
thing is
the
no.
implications of all of it is
That's
why
what I'm talking
everybody's
about.
upset.
That's
but
why people
guess
are
what's going to
upset.
happen?
Nothing.
Fucking nothing.
Yeah.
This
And
is,
guess what? We're just going to move on.
This is what I hate about global politics, and when everyone gets up in arms about the next political race or like shit that this happens.
It doesn't even fucking matter because
I-
we're not going to have anything to do with it. And then 4 years later, guess what? We're fucked from a different angle. It doesn't even matter.
Well, you're already getting emotional about it. I mean, who says you're fucked? What I say,
Orange man bad. Remember that.
what I say is,
We're lower middle class, dude.
I challenge anyone that is so up in arms about the global political race or the U.S. political presidency.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
I challenge them to give me a list of 5 ways the past 3 presidents have affected their personal life. I mean, waking up in the morning, going to work, getting their paycheck, buying their groceries. I challenge them to tell me how they were affected by the last
It doesn't mean
This
that they
is-
haven't. Are you even
This-
aware?
Do you even have
of
any
5
fucking
ways?
idea?
This could be a very
Yeah.
different podcast if I had Zach from my other band on because he's like so hashtag woke right now.
Do you think he could answer that question?
He would definitely have some shit to say to
Why?
you.
Because his broccoli tax went up 1%.
He doesn't eat
And
broccoli.
I
He's
would
keto,
tell him
dude.
that I couldn't
Broccoli
care
is
less.
keto, you fucking
No,
idiot.
no.
No offense,
It
Zach.
borders on carbs.
I do everything in my power
Refined
to stay
carbs.
far away
it's
from
not
politics.
a refined carb.
My point is, I agree with you on that. It's just like the whole politics thing. There's a reason none of us talk about it in polite conversation because it doesn't. Honestly, after a certain point,
There's
when you
usually not polite conversations to be
when
had
you
about
live the
politics,
life
though.
that we live, where you're lower middle class, it just doesn't fucking matter because all the stuff that is like sweeping changes at a high level, like tax to billionaires, blah blah blah, that doesn't even affect us. It won't ever touch us.
The real advice
It just
is
isn't going to do anything.
focus on your local elections.
Yes.
Yeah,
Don't-
yeah.
Don't worry about who's going to be president. Worry about who's going to be your next fucking town council.
Well, the president's only going to get stopped by the House, or maybe the fucking third branch if the Supreme Court does anything anymore. It's
Or if you're woke,
or
They're all
4 years
reptiles
later,
anyways.
the opposing party candidate is going to come in and undo whatever that guy did. So like that shit, I agree with you, Brad. That shit matters so much less than what happens in your own county. That's
I
a
don't-
good point, man.
I don't disagree that like we need to care about who's going to be president, but
sure.
So-
yeah, it'll just if it's good for you, it'll only get worse. And if it's
President-
bad for you, it'll get
presidency's
better,
fucked
and then
up
it'll get
anyways.
worse. It's
Right.
not up to us.
so what I see is people that get so up in arms about it that they put themselves in a bad mental state to where
Yes.
they are anxious and
They can't enjoy their life.
So there's this
They're
book
worried about
Which
some
is
shit
so
that's not
crazy that you
directly
let some
impacting
shit
them.
that you don't even have
Well-
a big voice in
Well,
like
you-
ruin your life.
You do it without realizing, though.
Yeah.
I
That's
guess,
the thing.
yeah, I guess.
So there's this
Yeah.
book by James Comey called The 7 Habits of Effective People, or what I think that's what it's called. The first fucking whole section is about your circle of influence versus your circle of concern. And what it talks about is only giving a fuck about things you can change. Because if your circle of
Yes.
influence is smaller than your circle of concern, if you're concerned about more things than you can
You're only
change,
stressing yourself
you're
out.
gonna be unhappy.
That makes a lot,
Oh yeah.
that makes a lot of sense.
And dude, when I fucking read that, it was like mind-boggling because what it talks about is narrowing your circle of concern to meet your circle of influence, and then once you gain control over that, that's when you can expand what you're concerned about. But to sit here and fucking go back and forth about shit that you don't have anything to do with, you're not gonna be able to change, is just a recipe for depression.
Exactly. Like, it might affect you, but
That's why politics are so
and that's
dumb.
the thing, it might not even affect you in the way that you think it does.
It's a way for
Do you know
people
what I'm saying?
to
Yeah,
be
it could be way
stressed out
different.
and
like,
upset about things.
I make the joke, like, Orange Man bad. Like, I don't know enough about Donald Trump as a person
Well,
or his policies.
Like an orange man, though.
I
I had
I
to.
don't-
I'm
I mean,
sorry.
quite literally.
I had
yes.
to. It's so
I don't know
easy.
enough about the guy to even hate him. Like, that's the thing. Like, that's a good point. What you're saying is like this is why I try to stay out of
You know what's
politics
sad?
myself. Is because it probably affects me, but in ways that maybe I would never even imagine. And I'm so busy trying to
I'm a
live
little
my day-to-day
Correct.
life.
I was just going to say that.
and
I'm a little
find-
bit busy trying to maximize
I'm trying to
my
like
life.
quote find my bliss in my own day-to-day life. That shit is just not on my radar.
You know what's sad though?
It's just not.
All the data points. So the guy can't shut the fuck up, and he's an idiot. But all the data.
It's not like he's not
But-
impeached yet, though. So like, it doesn't fucking matter, does it?
all the data points prove that his administration has had a lot of success for the economy,
Sure.
and that's
Whatever.
that is just a fact.
I mean, I'll take your word
I'm
for it. I
not.
don't
I'm
care.
not saying I'm switching sides. I don't even have a side.
Yeah,
But
me neither. I don't give a fuck.
But at least be able to sit back and go, okay, everyone hates this guy, but what's actually happening? Country's actually not doing too bad. He just can't shut the fuck up.
Yeah, he needs to get
I
off
mean,
Twitter.
Yeah,
It's
shut
not that
his
I want
mouth.
to like censor you guys. I want to steer away from this because like the politics
politics
thing.
are tough.
I don't
No,
understand.
I agree.
it.
I agree.
I'm not like an expert, so I don't even want to talk about it. I just don't want to piss anyone off.
I will say one last
what I'm
thing.
So here's what.
In closing,
Give me your last thing, and then I want to get back to my things.
Okay.
There you go.
my last closing: keep an open mind and only focus on the things that you can change.
I think that's legit.
Yes.
And what do you have,
That's
Dave?
And my thing is, watch the video that they made on YouTube of the difference between when Obama gave a speech on like killing bin Laden and Trump killing the leader of ISIS, not for any political reason. It's just to see Trump saying the shit that he has to say in that because it's so fucking funny. Because it's like they cut to him, and obviously the video is super biased in favor of Obama, but whatever, who gives a fuck? But it's like Obama being collected and like responsible or whatever, and he's like, you know, he's a smart dude, good talker, and he's being like, you know, we thank our American soldiers and like we're very, you know, proud of this moment or blah blah blah. And then it cuts to Trump and he's like, he died like a dog. He died like a bitch. Like he's just, it's so hilarious. Like the fucking dichotomy. I
mean,
love that.
It
dude.
works
It's
for
so
some
funny.
people, man. It's
And
fine.
whatever.
Just-
I try
when
so
you
hard
start
not
when
to
you
be
start talking about
political.
global politics, just eat butt and shoot guns.
There you
Those
go.
are the only two
What,
things.
what was,
are
no,
covered,
no, please, Brad. What was the thing the guy said from Ruination? What was he said?
There was three.
Smoke
things.
grass and eat ass or something like that.
No, he
He
said
straight up said eat butt.
Yeah,
Eat butt.
he was on the mic
It
and
didn't
he
rhyme.
was like,
It wasn't catchy.
if there's any advice I can give you fuckers, it's fucking shoot guns and eat butt. I think we got all our bases covered.
Let me get these out really quick. Okay. So Steve Harris, Iron Maiden as a whole,
Yep.
big deal for me. Rush, huge deal for me.
Yep.
Neil Peart writing the lyrics, being a drummer is incredible. Getty
He's
doing 16
incredible.
things on stage at the same time, just unmatchable. His sense of melodicism. Just listen to all of Rush from fucking
Correct.
Fly By Night all the way through Vapor Trails. I don't give a shit. Anything. Just listen to Rush. Just glazing over that real fast. Megadeth over Metallica, but listen to both. And Opeth, obviously.
Opeth
and they're
is
for a
great.
whole different reason. They're a mood. Opeth is a mood. You don't even have to be like a depressed Swedish guy. You just have to like understand that they're going to take you on this journey.
Damnation is the best album to have sex to of all time.
That is a great record. Deliverance, Damnation.
I don't even know if I usually don't fuck to music, but if you're gonna fuck to music, Damnation.
Is it
dude.
like relatable
Window
to
pane?
catatonia, like the mood of?
Honestly, yes, but no. In my opinion, Opeth is more like a broader. I feel like they're almost more fantasy, but they're not. They're not
like-
at all.
They have a bigger sadness.
I
They have a
no,
larger
no,
size
because
sadness,
Catatonia and
yes.
Catatonia's up there for me as well. They're way more like doomy, like sad, depressed, but they're like a accessible rock version of sad depression. Whereas Opeth is like, they don't even sing about like power metal dragons and shit, but I feel like you go on that sort of journey.
So
Like there's
you
a
got to be
scope.
you got to be committed to get there with Opeth.
Opeth has one of the greatest lead guitar tones of all time on almost every single
Opeth is
album
one
they
of my
make.
favorite bands ever, and I don't even know how to describe it as
Random,
much
but
as
that's a fact.
the way you listen to Opeth is you put on a record, you listen to it start to finish, you don't remember any of the names of any of the songs because that doesn't fucking matter.
And then it's called
You just-
Ghost Reveries, and it's one of the
You
best. albums
just
of all
listen to
time.
Ghost Reveries, you just listen to Blackwater Park, you just listen to Watershed, and then you just listen
Deliverance.
to fucking Still Life. And then you figure yourself out between all of those records, and then if you decide you're more into 70s prog, you just listen to Sorceress.
Is that better to do while you're like driving, or while you put like sound canceling headphones on and sit in a dark room?
It depends on the album.
It depends on who you are and what you're looking for. Maybe the second
Ghost
option.
Reveries headphones.
Ghost Reveries is for me, it's their masterpiece.
studio masterpiece.
For a lot of people, it's
101.
Blackwater Park, which I totally understand. Fucking Deliverance, every fucking record they put out from
they were
from
primed out
Blackwater
for like 12
Park
years.
all the way through Watershed, and not to discount any of the other records,
Still
are
Life
just
is so good.
Is
too.
that
fucking
are
perfect.
they like a record band where it's better to listen to a whole record than it is to pick
not
out?
necessarily? No.
For me, 100%.
Not for me.
You don't just pick out one song. You don't
the-
just listen to
The
Ghosts of
albums are
Perdition. You
incredible.
listen to the whole fucking record.
The albums are
calm
incredible.
down, AJ. Oh my
The
God,
albums
I'm
are
getting so mad.
incredible.
You don't
right?
put it down. You
Well, here's the
just
thing.
listen to it.
Their albums are incredible and are totally digestible as a full album, right? But their songs are you
It's-
can't single them out.
It's not for everybody. Let me put it.
Totally not.
There's the disclaimer for Opeth is that it's not for everybody. There are some parts that I've heard referred to as repetitive. Whatever.
Opeth is the ultimate example of an incredible band that is successful and deserves it and is a legendary band, but that inarguably is the prime example of like when we talk about cutting the fat.
Oh, they don't. They don't give a fuck.
cut fat.
Listen to the end of the song Deliverance, and
Yeah,
you'll
they
understand
go,
what we mean by
this part.
not cutting
This
the
riff
fat.
we're gonna
I'm getting
repeat
so many
8
mixed
times.
signals.
They go, this riff we're gonna repeat 8 times. Then we're
It's
gonna
a
change the drum part. We're gonna repeat it 16
It's a
more
20-bar
times.
phrase, and we're
you're
going to
going,
repeat it 18
huh?
times. But I'm going to say for me,
But then the songs are still incredible.
It
So
works
this
for
is,
me.
This is something that just popped into my head talking about European. Opeth is European, right?
they're Swedish. They're
Swedish,
not
right.
the band for what we do because they don't cut the fat. They don't give a
So-
fuck about you.
So
which
please
is
tell
great.
me you guys watched and enjoyed the show Metalocalypse.
Yeah,
Oh,
oh my God,
absolutely.
yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Was that not like the best fucking cartoon ever?
Oh yeah.
That's
Also,
a good one.
somebody, not
a good
not
one.
not in my top 5 or 10 or whatever, but somebody I want to shout
Oh,
out.
you're like a Rick and Morty guy, right?
I enjoy that
Yeah,
as well.
You're too smart for everybody.
Oh God.
Yeah, and my beard is. Never mind.
It
I
grows on his
disrespect
neck
women.
very
That's what I'm
hard.
getting at.
There's a fedora on his head.
That's true,
Continue.
my lady. Somebody I want to shout out, whether you listen to their solo albums or the records they did with their wife or whatever parts of bands they were with. Brian Beller, the bass player, Brian Beller.
Ooh.
He was the Metalocalypse bass player, like for the studio tracks.
I
He's
thought it was
also
all
the
Brandon Small. I
Aristocrats.
thought Brandon Small did everything.
No, he had Gene Hoglan do drums, which is fucking
Yes,
Hoagie's
he
is
did.
fucking non-stop, just one of the best drummers. So
Human
tight.
metronome.
The Atomic Clock.
I don't know if you guys ever noticed this, but when you're watching that show, when Squiscar Squig Elf is playing his lead lines, they took such attention to detail in his
Like
animation.
all the frets are like right.
It's correct.
Oh yeah.
It's
Well,
That's
Brendan Small does not
amazing.
fuck around. I mean,
Dude.
that was the guy that came up with the concept.
and
Anyway,
all those characters. are
Brian
based on
Beller.
real guys
Brian
and
Beller.
stuff.
He does the Aristocrats with Govan and Marco Miniman. Brian Beller does. He did Death Clock. He's done stuff with Satriani, I believe it was. He's done stuff with everybody. The guy is such a good fucking player. He's not technically like the most crazy fireworks guy, but Brian Beller is like one of the most consistent, like crazy guys to play nowadays without having to be showy.
He's in
so
the
good.
Aristocrats, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, shocker.
Yeah.
When you're talking about that, how you're not playing with Marco Miniman and Guthrie Govan.
I
if
feel
that's
bad
not
because he
your
just put out
bag.
a solo record that's supposed to be really great. I haven't listened to it yet. I'll get around to
Whatever,
it.
you'll get to it.
But Brian Beller, one of the guys. But and then the last few for me are, I mean, obviously Between the Buried and Me, and I can't even every single person in that band, no matter who it is, just for me, it's somebody I care about. Like whatever they're doing, is what I want to hear. That's what I'm interested in. Like Tommy's vocals, Paul's guitar playing, Dusty's quote rhythm playing, because he does play a lot of crazy solos and other stuff like that too. Like just everybody in that band.
Yeah.
Blake and fucking Dan, everybody's so incredible.
Blake is one of the most.
They all look. They're
today.
so good. They look bored when they play that shit.
Dusty just looks straight ahead and just plays the craziest fucking chunky riffs all in a standard tuning, and you're like, how are you moving those power chords? Like, what are you doing?
He takes a power stance and does not move.
Blake did one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen any drummer do, which is, I mean, obviously his parts are very challenging, right? And then he goes, let's go in the studio where it's bone dry under the microscope. There's no crowd. There's no energy. And I'm going to play Parallax 1 in its entirety in one take with one camera shot. And it's not going to be quantized, and it's going to be robot perfect. And I'm just going to have to try to figure that out. It's just on YouTube. It's like whatever length that album is,
24
like
minutes.
24
It just calls back to them
non-stop,
being
one
impossibly
take,
good.
no mistakes at all, no quantizing.
So another thing I learned about Between the Buried and Me, this was from the URM podcast, is that...
Great podcast.
Right, so they work with Jamie King almost exclusively. Like, they deviated a few times, they weren't happy, so they go back to Jamie King for the mixing and mastering. He actually has a lot of creative input into... Because you'd imagine a band like that is...
That's important to note.
Right, you'd imagine a band like that shows up and goes, this is what it's going to be.
Nope.
Fuck off, your job is just to record it. But...
Not if you're a good producer, it's not.
Yeah. And they're such close friends with him. Like, Ants, I think it's Ants of the Sky and The Great Misdirect, where they have the horse neighing right before.
That was on Colors.
Okay, so on Colors. No, it was...
Ants of the Sky is on Colors, I 100% promise you.
No, so you're right, but I'm thinking of Fossil Genera Feed from Cloud Mountain.
Yes.
So that's one with the horse neighing.
Yes.
All of those ideas were Jamie King's. They showed up and said... We have these ideas for these crazy genre bends, so let's do that. And Jamie King went, well, I'm a crazy Southerner, so why don't we fucking try this instead?
Which is funny because it's North Carolina, which isn't even that far south. But I know.
But he does have the accent.
He does.
He does.
Jamie King seems like such a fucking nice guy.
But it reminds me of a thing that it's a lesson for me, because it reminds me of a thing that Anabasis went through when we had our album mixed by Adam Bentley, and it came back with some creative liberties taken that we didn't expect. And some of them were like really good ideas, and some of them that we kind of rejected. But it's just kind of the idea that...
That's not the point, yeah.
Right, the idea is the bigger picture. You know, you think it's just 6 people in a band, but to make a final product, there's a lot of people involved, and everyone's got their stake. And it's something everybody should be able to be proud of after. I didn't realize that until I heard that some of those ideas didn't come from the guys in Between the Buried and Me. It was just the guy recording them.
Yeah.
So
it's just a message to be open to that sort of shit when you hear feedback like that might actually make things better.
Producing.
Don't be a fucking ego.
Producing an album for a band.
He wasn't the producer.
No.
He was just the engineer.
That's going to lead me to something.
He was a producer, whether he was credited or not.
That's going to lead me
to
one small point. So I've recently revised like a bass tone. Because we do all the modeling. If anybody cares about the gear stuff, we do helixes and or XFX, mostly helix for like Dave and I, Brad. The Line 6 helix stuff. I've recently revised a bass tone, and it's about feedback and input, right? So we're talking about what fits in a mix.
Yeah.
So we've been demoing a new song that you'll hear soonish.
That's a whole other
That's
conversation.
the production. That's the production of an album.
We'll get into that. Long story short, everybody, nobody's been
about.
hounding me or saying like, "Oh, your bass tone's garbage" or whatever. But it's just like trying to be open to understanding that I'm not the most important member of the band. Clearly not, because I play bass.
You're goddamn right.
Yeah, there's the joke.
You're goddamn right.
You're goddamn right.
Damn.
So I've changed the bass tone to something, at least for now, that I feel like works better in the mix. And then we sat down and tracked some of the stuff before we did this podcast today. Yeah. And to me, it sounds fucking incredible compared to what it used to be. So
yeah,
that's the whole thing. But looping this all back into it, the last 2 things I'm going to mention are for me influences or things that I think you should check out if you haven't. Jamie King involved Contortionist, The Contortionist.
Ooh, yeah.
Start to finish, their whole
band.
discography. Watching them grow as a fan since Exoplanet is just Holy shit! Like when they got Mike Lassard on vocals, like
He's incredible.
Like Intrinsic is. I used to
I was
say it
just
was
gonna
my
say,
favorite album.
Dylan's not here to say it for himself, but we all know
That's
from
his
working
favorite
with him,
one.
his favorite album.
It's
of all
probably
time
my
is
second
Intrinsic
favorite
by
now to Clairvoyant,
Contortionist.
which is
Clairvoyant was awesome.
It's a tough push, but like they just. So for me, and take this how you will or whatever, but certain like I'm not a lyrical guy. I'm a music guy, and there's certain music or certain artists or certain songs or styles or whatever it is that put me in like this headspace. It's almost like it affects your brain chemistry. If you guys understand what I'm saying, like
Yes,
there's
I do.
certain things that you hear, and when it goes into your ears,
Dopamine and serotonin.
it has to be some shit like that. It goes into my ear, and it no matter how I feel, what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, if I'm driving, I'm sitting, it hits my head, and it just puts me in this state of mind that's just something different than where I was.
What's amazing about
Yeah,
Contortionist is
And they do that for me.
their music is amazing, and they're almost like an undercover vibey band. Like we talk about bands
They
that
are
have a vibe.
100% vibe.
If you ever get the chance to see them live, their singer does something that I have never seen.
He's like a snake. He just like moves around the stage.
He's like a slow motion robot, and while that could very easily come off as gimmicky, they do it so
It's not,
well.
though. It's so
It's
man, they're
entrancing. I remember the first time I ever saw them, I couldn't. This is gonna sound really gay, but like I couldn't take my eyes off him.
Oh yeah.
Because it was just such. It just fit the vibe. So like that to me transcended the idea of having vibey music to having vibey music and vibey visuals
that
because their
presence.
lights. Yeah.
Like
Oh,
we just
yeah.
saw them recently.
He commands the room with that.
We just saw them recently locally, and without exaggeration, big, small, stadium, like club. That was probably the
matter.
best set by any band musically, like sound wise, vibe wise, light wise, that I've ever seen. Which is like, I'm not like an authority. I haven't seen a million concerts, but I've seen enough to know like that was something else. The sound, the feel. It wasn't even like crazy well attended, but like just the vibe in the room. Like maybe it's because we're fans, but something about that performance was like, holy shit.
No, it's about their singer.
That's the intangible.
It
That's
hits
what
you.
Tesseract does best too.
It
That's like
hits
why
you
they're-
somewhere
I
weird
think,
where
I think
you
Contortionist
feel
does
it.
it better. 'Cause
Oh, I'm not saying they don't. I'm
Yeah,
saying
Tesseract relies
that's
on
the
their
thing.
music, right?
But I disagree. That's what I was going to say is that like Tesseract, if you listen to their albums and it's not for you, that's okay. Now go see them live though, because all of the other stuff that's part of the vibe live is what they're trying to achieve. And that's what I love
The
about
only reason I have to disagree with that is because they rely so much on lights and almost like effects and shock value. The thing that the guy from Contortionist does, I forget his name. What's the singer's name?
Michael
Michael
Lassard, he's great.
Right. That is so authentic and never
Yeah.
been seen before
It-
that it doesn't matter what the lights are. It doesn't matter what is happening
it's
around
not
him.
even-
He demands the attention
not
of everyone
even-
in the room.
It's
Oh,
not
yeah.
even him for me. It's the whole band.
I was
everything
broad
they
spectrum. I
Yeah,
was
yeah,
saying
yeah.
that,
everything they did on that one set, whether they even remember it or not, whether we're a major stop on their tour, probably not, whether they give a shit or not. Every like piece of live footage I've seen from them as the band that they are for the last few years since they put out Clairvoyant as a full-length record
So good.
has been the same level of quality of them. Just like I don't know if they get wicked fucking ripped or like what they do. They just come out on stage and they show you this. It's almost like they're opening this weird little portal into another headspace.
They're like
I
their
don't-
own little nebula on stage.
I don't even know how to describe this without sounding
Great
weird
band,
or
man.
cliche, but like for me, their music does something to me that puts me in a different headspace, and I don't get that
you know,
very
whose
often.
music does that. to
There's-
me.
How do you do it?
I don't. There's no
that's-
way to
that-
quantify it.
that's-
That's the crazy part.
That's the big question is once you see it, how do you do that for yourself? How do you make that identifiable to you?
I just don't know.
That shit. That's like the enigma of being a live performer.
So
Correct.
there's like three or four maybe bands that can do this to me. So Between the Buried and Me, Opeth, Contortionist mostly recently as well. Also that EP they just put out, that Our Bones EP. It's like
So
2.5
good.
real songs and a cover. that first song, Follow, it like I put it on and it's like bloomy and like low gain and like this big like over compressed like wah kind of sound. That like I almost cried. I was like, what the fuck are they doing to me?
It's also one of those rare moments where so a lot of the bands that are established, you see them live and you're like, okay, it's a great live show. I know it's going to be live because they've been great since I've heard of them.
Yeah.
But if it's a band that kind of grassroots came up and you've seen it happen,
Yeah.
you almost like you share
you're
like
you're
like
feel like
invested.
you're like
invested.
proud of them. You're like you
Yes.
share in that with
You've
them. You're
been
like
on the journey with
That
them.
song,
You've seen
though,
where they came from. And
I
you've
was
seen
on-
how
I was on the way to
incredible
work.
they are
fucking
now.
powerful.
I have a
man.
45-minute drive to work, the job I'm at right now, and
Well,
I
that,
put it
it
on.
doesn't get too much shittier than
Wait,
that.
tell us about your drive through Albany.
Oh,
though.
Albany,
like
yeah,
the
Albany's a
infrastructure.
So I put it on one day just because like I have this thing where like I get reluctant to new music because I feel like I kind of latch onto what I liked, and then when
Sure.
somebody puts out a new record, it takes me a long time to get around to it. I'm just like I'm not like scared they're gonna suck. It's just like I love what I love, and I put that EP on.
It takes
like
me
that,
zero time.
like
I laser to the
17 minutes of their new EP, and that first like 3 chords that song Follow hits, I'm just like, what the fuck? Like it just hit me so hard, and it's even like different than what language or like
It's
clairvoyant
so
was.
weird
It's
because you have no feelings.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Who are you?
I'm talking to the sociopath in our band over here.
No, you're not. Dylan's not here. What the fuck are you
My
talking
point
about?
is, there's very few bands that do this to me, where I feel like my brain is actually being affected by the music they're playing. It's not just like, oh, that's cool or that's technical or that's interesting. It's like, what the fuck is happening? Like I'm in a different headspace. And then the other one for me, which I mean, if you know me, maybe it's not a surprise, but maybe some people who only listen to like the metal thing, Circa Survive has done that to me for years
Yeah,
now.
you've always told me.
And
about
it's
those
their
guys.
first 2 records specifically, Juturna and On Letting Go. Like I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just the style they do or the combination. Like I'm not a lyric guy, but I know all those lyrics based on the sound, if that makes sense. Like I don't know the lyrics like, oh, he was talking about this or his ex-girlfriend or whatever. It's like I know the sound that he makes with his mouth and his very distinctive voice, Anthony Green. So like I can sing the whole record to you without gleaning like a meaning from it, but that's just like a whole nother level of like I don't know. I have this weird connection to that band where there's something that they do to me as well. They put me in this headspace that's like
That's a weird thing you just mentioned.
I don't know if it's
detail
that
I never thought of.
I don't know if
the
it's
only way I know
that I
lyrics.
used to fall asleep to it every day during college because
Sure.
I'm one of those guys that needs noise to fall asleep.
Same,
Obviously,
bad.
Dylan
and
is
it's specifically
Dylan
movies.
is wicked not. That was a whole funny story. We should tell.
Obsessively has to have pitch black, dead silence, which isn't a real thing in real life.
Correct.
But he has to have it or
Circa
he can't
Survive,
sleep.
especially those first 2 records, have for the last like decade and a half have done something to me where it's like you put it on and I'm just like instantly like a puddle of human. Like
You guys
it's
wanna-
the weirdest thing.
You guys want to hear a weird thing? So there was this band. You've probably heard of them when you were in high school, and you might laugh when I bring this up. But the band Brand New,
I've heard of it.
Deja and Tendu and
the Devil and God are raging inside.
that
me.
song Jesus Christ is one of the most heartbreakingly beautiful things I've ever heard.
So
No joke.
The thing about that band, they emerged in like the era of pop punk emo. Like they were
Like
right
Taking
along
Back
with like
Sunday,
Taking Back
Fall Out
yeah.
Boy.
But the
They
thing,
were different.
they showed progress. But the thing that was so engaging about them is that the progress was not in a positive manner. If you
Everything they did is a bummer, but it's like
if you
great,
you
yeah.
listen to their albums like straight through, like yeah, some of it in the beginning is like okay, they're just like an emo band, whatever. But if you listen to it straight through, it's literally listening to the singer's descent into madness. And
Which is fucked up.
but what's engaging about it is that it's not a gimmick. Like that wasn't intentional. He was just writing
they're just
music
dudes.
that felt right to him at the time. So it's authentic that the shit got as dark as it did.
Yeah.
That's
But
fucked.
literally, the album "The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me." If you want to hear music that is just directly raw,
It's like heart tearing, dude.
yeah,
It's
raw
crazy.
passion. There's almost no artistic form to it. It's literally just the most guttural, emotional music you can listen to. It's "The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me."
Yeah.
and people like to bust my balls because they're like, oh, it's just that weird emo
I
band, right?
completely identify with you on that, though,
Dude.
dude. Like, when I heard that record, I was like, dude, this is some, like, he really feels this shit.
Yeah.
Even if I don't agree with it or it's not, like, what I understand, like, and like, okay, so we live in upstate New York. Like, they're Long Island guys. Like, it's not really connected, but, like, I went to school in college with a lot of people from Long Island and people that like knew them personally and shit. Like there's that
I didn't
song.
know that. That's
yeah,
cool.
there's that song. I don't know if it was called Limousine or whatever, but there was
It was
the
called
song.
Limousine.
Yep. And that was about a real life thing where like a young girl died in a limousine accident in Long Island, and it's like it was a big thing for that community. And it's like I don't know, I wasn't there, but listening to that and hearing the stories from the people that I knew that lived in those like townships or like communities or whatever, like that hit me even harder. I was like, this is like hauntingly beautiful music for like a fucking pop emo punk band.
They went to a dark place. And
Yeah.
their lyrics were provoking though. Like they in the song Jesus Christ, that second verse where
It's
he says
so beautiful.
He says like, Jesus Christ, I'm not scared to die. I'm a little bit scared of what comes after.
Yeah.
Do I get the gold chariot or do I float through the ceiling? And that is not a sad look at what happens. It's just literally somebody going, nobody fucking knows like what is gonna happen when this shit actually happens.
That song like
And
makes me
that,
cry like
that
every
that
time. I can't do
examination
it.
that examination of death without being like, oh, I'm it's sad, I'm gonna die. It's
Yeah.
literally just going like, what the fuck's like, nobody knows what the fuck's gonna happen.
Yeah.
But that, I don't know. Please,
I agree with you
that
100%.
album,
I'm
dude.
glad we could bond on this because that song, that whole record, but
That-
specifically that song, that shit fucks me up, dude.
Yeah.
I'm completely unfamiliar with it.
Dude,
I don't know if it would do anything for you, but that song specifically, like it like makes me cry. Like it
What's
fucks
that one?
me
What's that
up.
one? The archers with their broken bows or whatever.
I just know the record. I don't even know the song
It
titles.
says, I don't mean to keep quoting lyrics. This is the last one. But when he
Yeah.
says, who do you carry your torch for, my young man? Do you believe in anything? Do you carry it around just to burn things down? That's what I feel like the current state of fucking everything is. Everyone's carrying a torch and they don't know why. They're just carrying it to burn things down. And he
Yeah.
says exactly that.
Yeah.
It's only destructive the way people are being.
It's funny that you think about like a
And
band.
that was like 10 fucking years ago. He
It's,
put that
it's
out.
funny
Yeah.
that you think about a band like that from like what I equate to college, like my college time. Because like I got into that band when I was in college. There's a good, I would venture to say a good buddy of mine, this guy named Will Grandin. He's in a band from the Albany area called C-SPAN. They're cool guys. They're putting a record out soon. Yeah, there's your plug.
C-SPAN's cool.
Will got me into Brand New. Like I had never really heard them. It was like one of his things, but I had known like Taking Back Sunday. And like when I was like an emo kid in high school, like we all were, like that was a thing for me. Like My Chemical Romance, Taking Back Sunday, Fall of Troy, like all that kind of shit like came at
Brand
the
New
same
was
time.
a different ball game, dude.
They were, and I never got into them. And then in college, I liked Taking Back Sunday. I really liked Where You Want to Be, their first record, whatever the fuck that was called. And then the one with Liar on it and fucking Make Damn Sure, whatever the fuck that was called.
I don't know what the album was called, but it had like Cute Without the E and all that.
That was
shit.
their first record. I'm talking about their third one.
Oh, okay.
Whatever. I really liked that band at the time. It was something new that I had never heard. And he was like, oh, if you like them, listen to Brand New's first record because it literally is just Taking Back Sunday. Like unabashedly just copies every single song, every chorus, every chord progression, everything. That first Brand New record, it has like the chess
A
pieces
lot of people
on it.
said that, yeah.
It literally was just Taking Back Sunday. And then they put out Deja Entendu, and I was like, holy shit, this is a whole different level.
Dude, Sick Transit Gloria, Glory Fades.
It just
so that song
that song really like got to me.
Well,
Like, the
it
first
was-
time I heard it, like this is something different.
it's gonna sound weird because that was like the emo anthem of when we were in high school.
Was it? 'Cause I didn't know. I didn't have
but,
that experience.
But what people don't realize is that song was revolutionary because it was about a young kid, a young guy
who wasn't ready to like cross that threshold into like a mature relationship with a
Well,
with a
this
chick
is
or
the thing.
whatever.
It was about a young guy who was pressured into sex by a young girl.
Yeah.
And
They
that was at the
flipped
time
that
where rape
thing around.
was only considered to be from male to female. And this was about a kid in high school who was young and confused and at a party, and some girl forced herself on him, and he didn't know how to handle it.
And I'm sure
And
that like
that
is-
to me is why that song.
I thought that was super interesting, right?
Dude,
and like not only
yeah.
is it like a well written like poppy kind of
Oh,
song,
it's catchy as fuck. Yeah.
but like that to
That
me was
bass
such
line,
an interesting
boop, boop, boop. Yeah.
such an interesting vibe because you never hear that. Whether it's a personal story for the songwriter or not, like that's a whole different take on that style that you don't ever hear. You don't hear about, like, generally in general media, non-political. You don't really hear about like women committing sexual crimes against men as much, because it's just like that's a whole societal issue. But that's such an interesting song to lead a record off with. That's the first real song on that record.
10 years ago, like, that was before any of that was being talked about.
Absolutely.
And also, to say they're not musically innovative is a little bit wrong, because
I would never say that.
They use their instruments in a way that you don't hear a lot. And one example is that song, the Archers with all their bows broken. I forget, it's a weird title, but what they do is the entire song is a snare roll.
Yeah.
And what it does is it drives the feeling of the entire song, where it's just like, and that's the entire song. And then they finally break for the chorus, where it goes to like a and it goes to a cymbal. But like, I've never heard that in a song in my whole fucking life, where the entire thing is just like an accented snare roll. And it's the lyrics are driving, the music drives, like it's hard to say that they were not innovative with their instruments.
It's a weird thing, because I feel like those, and I got to them so late that I can't really claim them as one of my like top 10 influential bands. But in that style that I was into at the time, like when I got that direct feed, like that curated listen from friends of mine that were like Will and Gina were like, listen to this track, listen to this track, listen to this record, listen to that. It was so much of a big deal to me at the time, because I was like, oh shit, this is like what I was into 5 years ago, but what it developed into. Like, I missed out on it.
Yeah.
And it's just so interesting to me that struck that chord with anybody else, I guess is what I'm saying. Because like,
it always does, man. You're always going to find people that you connect with.
I was in a.
You don't.
That was in my drink. I finally got it.
What the fuck is that?
I don't know.
I was in a band really shortly with a few guys out of Long Island. They were like in the dead center of Long Island, like Port Washington area, which is on like the North Shore. Like, not that matters.
NoFo, the North Fork.
I guess.
I dated a girl from there, and it was always like either Suffolk County or the North Fork.
You in Nassau? Or you from Suffolk? So
That's
fuck
what
yourself.
It was,
yeah.
We were Nassau. Hardcore.
So they were really nice kids. They were cool guys. But like, I spent a little bit of time down there, and like Long Island, I feel like isn't really for me. Like that whole like, we're really rich, but we're still suburban middle class people. But like, our house is bigger than your house, kind of thing. Like whatever.
I wish I could tell you how much I related to that, because I would talk to my girlfriend at the time. She was going to school in Oswego, which is how I met her, and we were dating.
Why do all these fucking Long Island kids only go to SUNY schools? What is happening?
Yeah, because it's cheap. So we went down to visit her family, and she's like, yeah, our house isn't that nice. So we roll up.
We're middle class, and you roll up, and they have a mansion.
Yeah, it was like a $600,000 house with like heated floors, and
like
the TV was
like
the whole wall.
3 acres of perfect property.
And you're like, oh, so you're like poor here, huh?
Yeah. She's like, no, we're like middle class. This is like normal around here.
I went to the one kid's house. I don't even remember which one it was. They were all nice guys. I'm not knocking them, but like they were like, yeah, we're lower middle class. Like we live in Long Island. And we're not like rich kids. And I go into the kid's house, and his whole fucking wall, like this, and this is dumb, but like at the time, this is what it was like 10 years ago. Not even an exaggeration. His whole wall was a TV, like a 90-inch TV, and I was like, that is such an extravagant fucking purchase.
They were all cool kids. Like I'll give them that.
I'm not knocking the kids.
They weren't assholes.
I'm just saying, like, their lifestyle, like, I feel like compared to where
they just don't know.
We grew up,
get it.
is such a different ball game. We're like, hey, I make $32,000 a year. I'm middle class, and they're like, hey, that only pays the tips at the restaurants I go to every week. Yeah. That's a joke, and I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. I get it, I guess.
Just a difference in worldview.
Yeah. Long story short, I have to pee real bad, but brand new. I'm really glad we can connect on this because, like,
what's that?
We've been doing this podcast for at least 3 hours.
That's not true.
Nah, it's only 2.5. I'm glad that we could connect on that because I didn't know that about you, and that got to me too really bad. So that's my thing. Listen to Iron Maiden, listen to Rush, listen to Opeth, and then Contortionist, absolutely, and Circus Survive, and I guess brand new as well.
Specifically, if you're going to listen to brand new, please listen from Your Favorite Weapon until The Devil and God Are Raging Inside
And then
Me.
just kind of give up because those were the best 3 records.
Yeah, but that's when you really get to see the change.
The arc.
Their obvious.
Yeah, dude, their arc was insane.
And you feel it with them when that happens.
Yeah, dude. Fuck, I mean, should we call it? Everybody has to piss. We've been doing this for hours.
My God, I've already pissed my pants twice.
Like a man, like a real man.
Yeah. I'm
Just
just
piss your
wearing
pants,
a
bro.
diaper.
No, you're not.
I'm wearing a Woody pull-up.
You're pissing all over my couch.
Dude, Buzz Lightyear's on my ass.
Fuck yeah. I feel like the more we do these things, the less and less the stuff we talk about is actually going to matter or have any kind of like
Oh, it already does.
reasoning. You know what I mean? No, I mean like the stuff we're talking about is like major stuff in our lives. It's like our influences and stuff. It's going to turn into trash. Like we're going to eventually be talking about just trash. Like fucking, I hate the way fucking cranberries taste or whatever. Like it's gonna be bullshit, and that's the guts. That's the stuff I can't wait to get to. Is when we've done enough of these.
When we start
to where
talking
the
shit about
conversations
cranberries,
just get hilarious and have no direction. That's my favorite podcast. Is when we get into the stuff. Once we start talking about the shit that is pointless, that's going to be the most entertaining shit. I
think the best thing we can hope for is that we're the podcast that people put on and then forget they're listening to.
Mm-hmm.
So like we get the plays, but nobody's actually listening to what we're saying.
Yeah.
It's just
That'd be
background
sick.
noise for whatever they're fucking
And every
doing
once in a while they
paperwork
hear
or-
us say something and they're like, wait, what the fuck are they talking about? What? Yeah.
That's best case scenario.
That's always going to be my forte. Like I could sit here and talk all night with you guys about whatever influences and music and business and whatever, right? But my favorite shit to talk about is poop. It's just garbage. Just garbage that makes you be like, are you fucking kidding me? That's the best shit, man.
But the best thing is that when you talk about poop, you're very entertaining when you do it.
I guess so.
And
Hopefully.
we're trying to capitalize on that shit.
Yeah, man. That's the point.
So long story short, listen to the people we told you to listen to.
Yeah.
Listen to us.
Marty Friedman, brother. He's the best. I wanna
Buy
meet him
merch or
someday.
whatever to support us if you're so inclined. And just more poop coming.
Yeah, a lot more. Yeah.
Unless
we're
you're
going to
me,
keep
I
doing
get-
these fucking things until
get
somebody begs us
constipated a
not
lot.
to. And when they do, we're going to tell them to kiss our ass.
So like 2 weeks from now, when Pat's
No.
like, guys, you
Pat's
gotta-
going to go, you got to stop. And we're going to go, nope. Sorry, Papa.
We got to stop
happening.
calling him out, though, because he listens to these and he's going to be like, why you guys always picking on me?
No, we're not picking
And
on
we're
him.
going to go fucking be here then, and we won't.
No, I love you, Papa.
Just calling him Papa is the creepiest. Like the
He's
distance
Papa,
between
whatever.
your mouth and the microphone changes when you say Papa.
Papa.
And it
I love you, Papa. He's daddy.
he's-